miles over the Jefferson Memorial here in our nation's capital. We are live at Nationals Park for the 89th All-Star Game on an absolutely beautiful Monday morning, at least at 6:30 a.m. on the East Coast. This is First Things First. We have taken the show on the road. I am Jenna Wolf, sitting alongside the Hall of Famer, Chris Carter. It's great to have you here. Nick Wright, it is great to be here with you. It is going to be a fun 3 hours on a perfect day.
I'm so excited to be out here. It brings up slight memories to me. It was 1 year ago, almost today, that this show was somewhat formally introduced to the public. Chris and I sitting at the most recent All-Star Game. Then shortly thereafter added Jenna Wolf, a year in. Very excited. This is my first time in this ballpark, so I'm very excited to be here. It's great.
Yeah. Beautifully manicured. Looks great.
What type of grass we going with,
Yeah,
Steve?
go ahead, tell us.
We got a little blend here, a little outfield here in Washington. You're not necessarily all the way on the East Coast, a little to the south. Get a little humidity here, so you can't just have one type of grass. It will burn off in the summer humidity, so we'll get to that later in the show.
CC, our landscaping expert, among other things.
Yeah, I'm describing the grass. Jenna's doing all the monuments.
Absolutely right.
I'm going to get off that corner real fast. I got my first one, and I'm good to go. All right, we are going to start, since we are here at Nationals Park. Let's talk some baseball. The hottest division in baseball right now is the American League East. The Boston Red Sox with a 4.5-game lead over the Yankees at the break, but it feels a lot closer than that. Since these two teams played just 2 weeks ago, the Red Sox have been on a tear. They've won 12 of 13, while the Yankees have gone just 8-6. And here we are at the midway point. Nick, I'll start with you. How do you think this plays out now in the second half?
Well, typically a 4.5-game lead at the break isn't much. You can overcome that, especially when it's in your division. They're going to play each other another 10 times. But when the team you're trailing in Boston is on pace for 112 wins, hard to find those losses to make up. I mean, the Yankees are having a spectacular season. I understand last year they were way ahead of schedule. This year they are setting a new schedule entirely. They're on pace for 106 wins, which would be the most in Major League Baseball in nearly 15 years, yet they find themselves 4.5 games back at the break. There's no shame in going 8-6 over a 14-game stretch, but going 8-6 while the Red Sox only lose once in 2 weeks, now you find yourself 4.5 games back. Of course, the Yankees could come back and win the division, but the Red Sox are playing so well, a 4.5-game lead almost seems like enough at the midway point.
Yeah, that is a huge lead at the break, given what they're doing, Nick. You mentioned the win total they're on pace for, but it's also the hitting and the pitching. People say, well, the Yankees, they're on pace to break the home run record. Yeah, but will good hitting, being the long ball, be better than good pitching? And we have seen in the postseason, you want the good pitching. That's what the Red Sox have. What are the huge differences between where these organizations are, the starting pitchers of Boston, and what they're able to do on the night in, night out basis, and what the Red Sox and their lack of consistency. The Yankees with their lack of consistency with their starting pitchers outside of Severino and CC Sabathia, they've struggled.
Listen, Severino's been great, and Sabathia has been, I think, better than most people would expect at this advanced age. But you're absolutely right. But the fact that the Yankees, we're going to point out, because they're trailing the Red Sox, where they need to improve. I know we'll talk about a trade. They can make things like that. During the basketball season, what was my favorite stat with the Houston Rockets? 65 wins, right?
Yeah. There's only 20 teams that have done it. 15 of them won the championship.
Right. So only 20 teams in NBA history had ever won 65 games. And we talked about that all year long. Only 18 teams in baseball history, that goes far longer than NBA history, have ever won 106 games. The Yankees and the Red Sox are both on pace to do that this season. These are two seasons that, if they were happening individually absent of each other, we would recognize, I think, more so what a torrid pace both these teams are on.
It's also really hard to predict what's going to happen in the second half. Remember, the Yankees started slow. Red Sox started fast. Now, then the Red Sox took off. The Yankees dropped out. Now the Red Sox have been red hot, and the Yankees obviously are looking for a little better pitching, and they've slowed down. So this sort of, they've exchanged leads back and forth. The momentum has shifted back and forth, but it just is going to make for just a great second half.
And what we also have is, you have on the Red Sox side the guy who I believe has been the best player in baseball this year, Mookie Betts, along with what you could argue one of, if not the best pitcher in baseball, in Chris Sale. And then on the Yankees side, it has been as advertised. Even though Stanton's not pacing towards 60 home runs like he was last season, it's just, I mean, you said it almost as an aside in the beginning, but we should reiterate it. On pace to break the Major League Baseball all-time home run record for a season. I mean, that was set by the Mariners in the late 90s. Like for the Yankees, or at least the Mariners have the record for at the break. And then I mean, what the Yankees are doing is what we thought once they added Giancarlo Stanton.
Yes, but the Yankees, too, what will they do at the trade deadline? Will they try to add another bat, or will they try to add another arm? I think they need another arm, especially you have to determine when you get down to August and September, how do the Yankees get from their starters to Chapman? Is it someone in mid-relief, or do they go out and acquire another starter? Those are questions that Cashman and the rest of the brass there for the Yankees are going to have to answer.
But that's why what we said, they could be 29 games over 500 and on pace to set the home run record, and still 4.5 games back. Seems like such a discrepancy right now because nothing is safe in the AL East, but it's still, you want to be a little closer than that.
And listen, initially I was skeptical of it. But baseball adding the extra wild card game, the extra wild card team, has been wildly exciting. You guys know I'm from Kansas City. The Royals were involved in an unbelievable game a few years ago that then ended up propelling them all the way to the World Series, a World Series they lost. So I like that more teams are in it. I like that now 5 teams make the playoffs. But there is the odd situation a year like this year where it would look like a team that is likely going to win 100-plus games, their whole season's going to come down to one game. And if it is the Yankees, if they can't catch Boston, then that one starting pitcher really, really matters. Then you could be playing an 87-win team that would have the edge because if you like their ace better than you like Severino. Yeah,
I like the wild card. You get an extra team in there. It is one game, but if you don't win your division, I mean, you're lucky to be in there. So I think it's fair. But as you mentioned, it's hard to imagine a team with 100 wins and then they got to win that one game.
Right.
Well, if the Yankees and the Red Sox do have to play for that one game, I'm sure it'll be super easy to get tickets. So that's something we can look forward to. In our nation's capital, site of the 89th annual Baseball All-Star Game. We're here at Nationals Park the morning after the Home Run Derby alongside the Hall of Famer Chris Carter and Nick Wright. I'm Jenna Wolf.
It is great out here. Last night, this stadium was damn near levitating in the air by the end of the Home Run Derby. And today's an even nicer day. A little CC's our resident meteorologist, a little cooler today.
Yes.
A little breezier.
Home Run Derby got off to a great start last night. Most of the time, it's hard to keep that energy, but the hometown hero was able to come through. It was an amazing atmosphere.
Beautiful.
Absolutely amazing.
Let's start there. You literally could not have written a better script for what happened right here in this park last night. In the Home Run Derby, hometown hero Bryce Harper struggling the first half of the season, hoping to resurrect his season in front of 50,000 strong here at Nationals Park. His dad was pitching to him. The crowd was rooting for him. And Bryce Harper delivered an epic comeback in the final round against Kyle Schwarber to win the Home Run Derby. Absolutely incredible. CC, how awesome was last night's win for a guy who really had been struggling and who really needed the energy which he fed from that crowd?
Yeah, I think it's important for fans to know what type of struggle that he is going through personally. In his contract year, you would not expect him to be batting under 220, which he is doing with his pending free agency. Probably one of the top 5 biggest names in all of baseball. You would expect him, after the disappointment of the last couple years in the postseason, the Nationals not being able to make that type of mark. This was his mark. I mean, he's been on the scene for a long time, but how's he lived up to? And Nick, I know that you follow LeBron, and LeBron was kind of a lot like Bryce Harper, Sports Illustrated cover boy at the age of 16, now being with the Nationals in the face of Major League Baseball, but not living up to the expectations we have seen LeBron James. So spectacular night for him, a guy who's having a disappointing season.
And I wonder if this will be the moment that propels him in the Nationals the rest of the season. Like, they're a team that, while right now they wouldn't be in the playoffs, it's not like they're out of the race. They're playing 500 baseball. They're 5 games back of the Phillies in their division, and that's with Harper, like you said, batting .215 on the year. You also wonder if it will propel maybe his career forward with Washington because he's a pending free agent. But that's all things down the road, which I know we're going to get to. What this was last night was storybook. It's the type of things we say, you say you couldn't script it. Well, they could script it, but it would come across as not so believable.
So set the table. Down 18-9 in the final round.
Down 18-9 with 90 seconds left. Now, he knows he has the 30-second additional time, but he looked like, to me, it looked like he was drawing dead. It looked like he had no shot, and then he hits home runs on 9 of the final 10 pitches he sees. He and his dad kind of fudged the rules a little bit because they knew they were up against the clock. They didn't wait for the ball to land anymore. Just keep going. And when I say with 90 seconds left, he didn't start hitting those home runs with 90 seconds left. His dad, after the timeout, started missing pitches, which was odd. It looked like he was throwing and breaking balls in batting practice. And then he got in a groove that would have lit any crowd up, but it's the hometown crowd. It's their guy that you said, the LeBron-type expectations. It was unbelievable. I'm sitting there watching it with buddies, and we had, of course, bets on how many home runs he was going to finish on. And the lowest number anybody had was 13. And with a minute left, we thought he wasn't even going to get to the lowest number. He ends up tying it as time expires. Then he gets the 30-second add-on and winning it. That was as good as a home run derby can be. Like, you can't have a more compelling home run derby. And I'll give Major League Baseball credit in this regard. They changed the system. The time, instead of the 10 outs, it's a far more compelling viewing experience. And it adds real tension to what you're seeing.
We talk all the time, CC, about pressure with big-time athletes, and you don't generally think of pressure when it comes to the home run derby. But here's a guy who's playing basically for a contract this year, who struggled the first half of the season, who basically came out and said, I'll play in the home run derby, the All-Star game, when it's here in our park. Everyone here is rooting for him. He's the biggest name on the roster last night, and he comes out trailing and then delivers. And if you're here in the stadium, you heard the energy. If you're watching at home, even the announcers were shocked as he kept going yard, yard, yard each time.
I mean, it was one of the things that we expected to see from Bryce Harper. You know, the guy was a phenom as a kid. We've been following his career. He hadn't had moments like that. We've seen the other players that are the faces of baseball. We've seen them have moments during the regular season, postseason. Really, baseball is about the postseason. And until Bryce is able to do that in the postseason compared to in a home run derby. Now, it was a great script for a guy having a bad season, but to say this is the highlight of his career,
well, I don't think it's. I mean, he won an MVP a few years ago. I don't think it's the highlight of his career. It's the highlight of his season so far. And we've seen home run derbies where guys were on this great upward trajectory, do great in the derby or win the derby, and then the second half of the season goes sideways. I mean, the curse of the home run derby was something people brought up.
Saw it last year.
Does it screw up your swing? Does whatever it. You wonder if this could be, and I don't want to overreact to just a moment, but you wonder if this could be the flip of that. A guy who's just scuttling along. Now, he does have 23 home runs, but it was the only thing on the year he'd been doing well was hitting home runs. If that can be the type of thing that helps turn his season around. You
know, yesterday we sat here on the show, we had Tom Verducci on, who just wrote an article about how underrated Mike Trout is. We talked about how he could walk down the street, you wouldn't know who he was if he wasn't wearing a uniform. When you look at a guy like Bryce Harper, would you say Bryce Harper right now is one of the biggest stars in baseball?
He should be the biggest star in baseball. Mike Trout can be the best player. He is the best player. But Bryce Harper, because of the cachet he had coming into Major League Baseball, because of the way he carries himself, because of the way young people gravitate towards his style, his flair, he should be the biggest star in the sport. He can be the biggest star in the sport. He has the talent and the look to be the biggest, and he carries himself like he's the biggest star in the sport. And a couple years ago, he played like the biggest star in the sport. He's had some minor injuries, and then this year, the shift has really hurt him. There are some other things that have really hurt him. But baseball needs guys like Bryce Harper. Like, Mike Trout can end up being the greatest baseball player ever. Like Mickey Mantle, our generation's Mickey Mantle, whatever. But Mike Trout is so understated. You need to have a flip side to that, a guy that's going to be overstated, but that only works when you are at the top of the sport. He has been in the past. This year, he hasn't been.
It only works when you're great, all right? And that's the pressure that Bryce, that he will be under throughout his career. It's high expectations, but will he be able to live up that? Is he the biggest star in baseball? He's one of the biggest stars. I wouldn't say he's the biggest star because he hadn't had the highlights that we are used to seeing with the biggest names in baseball.
So do you think the Nationals then, to forget what we think he might have in the second half, should the Nationals go all out to try to bring him back?
Listen, the all-out part is interesting. We saw a guy who statistically had a very similar opening 5 years of his career to Harper's opening 6 years in Giancarlo Stanton. And Stanton got a 13-year, $325 million contract that instantly became something of an albatross for the Florida Marlins. That's why Giancarlo Stanton is now a New York Yankee. I would be hesitant to give anybody in sports, anybody, I'll be honest, in life, a 9, 10, 11-year guaranteed deal. But if you're the Nationals, would you pay Bryce Harper, like Tom Verducci said yesterday, $40 million a year for 5 years? I would. I always buy in the talent. And when you have Scherzer, when you have Strasburg, when you have this market, you have the ability to compete for championships. In his 6 years in the pros, he's been to the playoffs 4 times. Now, they've been one and done in the playoffs all 4 times. Bunch of Game 5 losses in the short ALDS. But I don't think you can let a talent like Bryce Harper walk in free agency and get nothing in return.
Yeah, it becomes hard for the franchise, and especially in doing shows like this. I don't think it's right for us to put the pressure on the franchise, go all out. They have to do something that's smart for them. And like Tom said yesterday, a shorter-term deal compared to the one Juan Carlos got would be better. And also, look at all these bad deals in baseballs, these long deals in baseballs. Yeah, you sign a guy when he's in his prime, you sign him to 6 to 8 to 10 years, he's going to be outside of his prime. So a lot of those end of the years, you're going to be eating those, and I believe that's really bad for baseball.
All right, we are just getting started here on a Tuesday morning live from Nationals Park in our nation's capital. So much more coming up on First Things First. Nick Swisher will stop by. Dave Winfield, John Smoltz is going to be here, and Rob Manfred, the commissioner. All coming up on First Things First. First Things First, on the road in Washington, D.C. Lincoln Memorial, a bunch of fast walkers in Washington, D.C. Never realized how fast everybody's always moving until you actually stop and take a look.
Yeah.
We are at Nationals Park. Last night, the Home Run Derby. Oh, how about this? 2010 Derby.
Oh, that ain't
starring
last night.
our friend Nick Swisher. That was not last night. Swish, you remember how many home runs you hit?
Yeah, I think 5.
It was a 4 or 5?
Well, let's say, can we add one and make it 5?
let's call it 5.
Hey, we
Let's
could
go
say
5.
30 if
Let's
you
let's
want to say
balance, bro.
30.
I wish. Guys, do you know how nerve-wracking that is right there?
Tell us.
It is so tough because you're normally used to hitting what we call like the cage, the turtle, you know,
Yeah.
that comes over. You feel very safe in there, right? But when it's gone, it's a little different.
So, well, let me just say, I brought
I'm
up
going
earlier.
to allow him to get away with that with y'all, okay? But with me, do you know how much pressure that is? Oh, my God, it's an all-star game. Swish,
Hey,
stop it.
You're right. You're right.
You choke.
You're right. Yeah.
You choke.
You know what? I felt like because
it's not
I could have
the
made
pressure.
a better appearance, but that's all right. I'll take it, man. At least I was part of it, man.
It didn't look like you had a whole bunch of sleep before that either. Looks like you
Had
hey,
the hat all up right there.
Thank you.
At least I didn't have it backwards, though, right?
I'm going to tell you, since that was 2010, right?
Yeah.
I don't
8
know.
years
Something
ago.
happened with your head since then, man. Your head's a lot smaller now. No.
Oh, my God.
He knows what I'm
Anyway,
talking about.
I think we all know. I disagree. I happen to think you were
you.
under a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You have not just
Oh,
your
yeah.
team watching,
Yeah.
you have fans from all over
Oh,
watching.
yeah.
Yeah,
As
it's a lot of
opposed to
pressure.
a regular baseball game
Yes,
where it
we
shows
just
baseball
had-
Yeah. Nobody's
on a
there.
sand
Where'd you go to
lot.
college?
The Ohio State University. You know that, baby. Oh,
Listen,
wait.
I
Swish
can't-
can
I
take
can't
it. Listen,
compete.
Swish has lived a charmed life. I was talking about this when we saw you in the lobby yesterday. And Chris's lovely wife, Sue, said he's always so happy. I was like, man, just read the man's resume. I'd be happy too.
I tell you what, man.
The guy's woken up every day with a great life ahead
I
of him.
feel like I wake up every morning in a 3-0 count, man. You know, I
Love
feel
it.
like life has been good. I'm living my best life right now, man.
God
Okay.
bless you, man.
That's
You and
all
Cardi
right.
B.
I'm going to take one last stab at this, and if I get thrown off the corner, I'm not doing it anymore. Was Bryce Harper under any pressure last night? There's a lot of eyes on Bryce Harper. The first half of the season that he's already had, a lot of guys are looking at him. He was the biggest name on that home run derby roster last night. Every single person here cheering for him. Plus, he was dressed to the nines. Like, there was the script was written for him to have an incredible night.
There's no doubt about it. I think Bryce really stepped up when he needed to last night. Obviously, in the first half, power-wise, he's been good. I think 23 bombs. You know, he's got 50-plus RBIs right now. The one thing that we look at as media is that batting average. I think he's at 214 right now, which a guy of Bryce Harper's stature, we expect that to be higher, especially when you got guys like Scott Boras saying this guy wants $400 million. So I think in general, here in his own home crowd, you know, where things started for him to be able to put on a show like he did and to finish strong like he did, especially in the finals against Schwarber.
He had 9 home runs with less than a minute. Well,
now that was pressure.
9 and 10.
He had 9 home runs with less than a minute left.
Yeah.
And he finished with 18 before they got to the extra 30 seconds. It looked like he had no shot. Looked like he was drawing dead in it, and it looked like his dad was rattled. You know, it might have been under pressure. The dad throwing BP.
Well, it's because his biceps were getting in the way, bro. That's what happened.
All of a sudden,
it runs in the family.
Goodness.
Big guy.
It's hitting like the outside corner. He's like throwing and breaking stuff. Like, what are you doing? And then he just is perfect for the final minute for the home crowd. We've seen guys have great home run derbies after great first halves.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we're like, did the home run derby screw them up? When they have bad second halves. Like we saw, was it Aaron Judge last year? Right?
Yes, it was.
The terrible month of August shortly after the derby. Do you think the opposite could happen to Bryce? Not because of anything to do with his swing, but just the momentum of the moment, having the All-Star game here.
Right.
And it's not like he's been terrible this year.
Correct.
Just can't hit for average.
Right.
He's getting on base fine. He's hitting bombs.
Of course.
Do you think this could turn his season around?
Absolutely, man. I'm not a guy that believes in the home run derby is bad for you. I think in a day and age where people like the flash, they like the swag, they want to see the best players we have in our game. It's just like the dunk contest.
Absolutely.
I mean, who wants to pass up on the dunk contest, you know? I can't dunk, so, I mean, that'd be great. But
I understand.
Still, just in general, for Bryce to show up the way he did last night, this could get him back in that groove. Kevin Long, the hitting coach of the Washington Nationals, was my hitting coach in New York. Hey, man, he says this kid is primed to have a great second half. He needs it. His team needs it because we always expect the Washington Nationals to be a playoff team every single season. This could be one of those years where that streak breaks.
Then you and the hitting coach, did you talk about the kind of the loop in his swing, with him kind of having a home run swing? Is he going to shorten that up for the second half of the season? And with the shifting seems to have gotten in his head.
Well, I mean, the shift is tough, man, especially on left-handed batters. There's no doubt about that. But it's part of the game.
Yes.
Right? I mean, everybody else in the league is dealing with shifts as well. But I think just in general, you've seen the small adjustments that Bryce has made from the beginning of the season until now. That front leg kick is a little lower than what it normally is. Hey, once he starts feeling sexy again, though, that leg kick's going to start coming back up, man, and he's going to start hitting balls off these scoreboards out here.
Depending on what happens in the second half, a lot of people wondering whether he will be worth that $400 million contract that's sort of out there. Should the Nationals go all out at this point to try to keep him?
Well, I'm telling you what, they do have an amazing team, especially like when you look at the beginning of the season on paper. When you look at the roster, just like you do football or basketball, the Washington Nationals looked like they were primed to go to the playoffs. You got Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Gio Gonzalez. You got guys like Bryce Harper, Rendon, Zimmerman. But the problem is everybody's been hurt this year. And you can't make the club in the tub. There's no doubt about that. And for them to be able to be where they want to be, you have to stay healthy. They've struggled with the injury bug this year. I'm hoping the second half pays off for them, man, because teams like the Phillies have been an unbelievable surprise. The Atlanta Braves are absolutely doing it so far this year. So for the Washington Nationals, man, you better not slack off too far, because if you get too far back, there's no coming back from there.
All right, let's talk about tonight's game. You got Chris Sale and Max Scherzer. I think you could have made a strong case Jacob deGrom should have been a starting pitcher in this, but it's an all-star game. I mean, everyone's going to get to play that's available. What do you think of the starting pitching matchup, even though we'll probably only see these guys? I guess it's not that different from
Like a
regular
pitch.
baseball games now. We'll only see them one time through the order, and then we'll just go on a trail of relievers.
Well, you could even say Luis Severino could start for on the American League side. But either way, man, these guys are nasty. They deserve to be here. Chris Sale has been a dominant force since he showed up in the league. I think deGrom is having a heck of a year. I don't think because these guys aren't starters that it's going to take any of the shine away from being an all-star. I hope these these guys know that because they're one of the best we have in our game. It's just a shame that you can't have multiple starters, you know? I mean, obviously, you're going to piggyback guys like Sale. You're going to go with Severino. And then who knows? You could bring in guys like Chapman, Kimbrel. I mean, there's so many amazing guys we have. It's just a shame that we're only going to see 9 or 10 of our best pitchers on each side.
Just the third time that the second time we've seen these two pitchers rather come out 3 consecutive years. Obviously, they've been dominating both, the American and the National League. Do you expect them to spend any more time out there, or are you going to see them as short as we have been seeing them?
Yeah, I feel like this isn't, like the teams have places to go.
Absolutely.
And the Boston Red Sox need a guy like Chris Sale. I mean, David Price has struggled a little bit in the first half. He'll come strong in the second half. But still, man, this is not about going 9 strong innings. This is about showcasing our best players we have for our fans. This place is going to be packed out. The energy is going to be off the charts, just like it was last night for the home run derby.
Speaking about one of the best players, I was going to the bathroom, taking a little break, and I had a couple people from Jersey kind of run up to me. Jersey people, they're aggressive.
They're all over the place.
Man, they want to talk about Mike Trout. Man, forget about all these other. He is the face of Major League Baseball. Do you think that Trout, at this point in his career, is underappreciated?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit. I also feel like him being on the West Coast has a lot to do with that. I mean, obviously, East Coast media drives it all. So I think, now being part of the media side of things, you kind of understand that a little more. But Mike's that type of guy where he's kind of a quiet guy. He's kind of chill. He's not really swagged out. He doesn't like all the attention, and that's fine. Just like Aaron Judge, same thing. Judge, doesn't like all that attention. So I think just in general, as much as he is probably the best player we have in our game, it's crazy to say that he is underappreciated, but I'm telling you, with the record that the Anaheim Angels have, with the best player in the game, we expect that man to be in the playoffs.
Well, that's the problem for him. Sure, part of it has to do with the coast he's on, but Yasiel Puig became a star. Kershaw's a star. You can be a star on the West Coast. We saw King Griffey Jr. up in Seattle be the face of the league. Then Alex Rodriguez after him. Ishiro. You can be a star on the West Coast.
I agree.
Bonds, your team's got to be in the
all those
playoffs,
guys had a little flair, though. If you look at Ken Griffey Jr., what he could do. If you look at Barry Bonds, what he can do. All those guys had a little edginess to them.
Had a little something to them.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest part is the lack of the playoffs. So let's go East Coast bias to 2 teams that will be in the playoffs.
Okay.
The Yankees and Red Sox.
Yeah.
Right now, the Yankees are on pace for 106 wins. Only 18 teams ever done that in Major League Baseball. What they would get as their reward is a 1-game playoff. So winning that division is wildly important for either of these teams who obviously could win the World Series. How do you see that division shaking out?
Well, I think it's going to come down to whoever makes the move at the break. I think there's obviously been a lot of talk about guys getting bounced around, and obviously we talk about trade rumors all the time. That's what we do. I think just in general, the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox have a chance to be better, as crazy as it sounds. Boston Red Sox have some bullpen trouble. They could use a little help back there. They could use a little help at second base. The Yankees on the other side could use a starter. They might use a power bat on the corners of the infield. They haven't really gotten a whole lot of production from first base this year. But I think just in general, if Greg Bird picks his game up like we all know he can, they're going to play amazingly well in the second half. So I don't know, man. It's crazy. 2 teams, 100 wins in the same division. And like you're saying, you got to play in a 1-game playoff against maybe a team like the Seattle Mariners, and maybe you get Big Maple or somebody like that. It could be tough.
Don't get ahead of that 1-game playoff. Don't forget the regular season ends in Boston with the Yankees traveling to Boston.
3-game set.
That could be an amazing end to the regular season right there.
We all hope it is, because obviously that fight this year between Tyler Austin and Joe Kelly brought the fire back. And that's what we want to see. We want to see some emotion from these guys. It's been a minute since Don Zimmer and Pedro went at it. Alex and Jason Varitek went at it at home plate. So I think just in general, it's good for our game. I think anytime you have the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees playing well, obviously it's good for our game.
Speaking of the Yankees, they're in the mix right now in that Manny Machado race.
Yeah.
Would you rather see them go after him, or would you rather see them put all their eggs in that basket to try to go out and get a starting pitcher?
Well, that's the thing. Who are you going to get? There's not really a whole lot of frontline starters out there to get. At the trade deadline, I know Brian Cashman's a man. He's been doing it for 20 years, but it would be hard for me to say that Brian Cashman wants to go out and get a number 3 or a number 4 starter. If you're going to go to the deadline and give up all your great prospects you have and some of your ready guys, I want a number 1. I want a Jacob deGrom. I want a Thor. I want somebody like that. So when you look at it from that side, the Manny Machado thing sounds amazing, because he can impact the lineup from day 1, and he's going to be in there every day till the end of the season.
All right, real quick, let's talk about the Dodgers for a second. Listen, they are by the skin of their teeth leading their division. They got a half-game lead, but it's even harder than that than it sounds, because it's only a 2-game lead on third place, the Rockies. What are the Dodgers? I think the Dodgers are the most talented team in the National League.
I
No
agree.
disrespect to the Nationals.
Of course.
And there's no shame in being 53 and 43, but this team could be 58 and 38. Like, they could be better. Other than being healthy, what do they need to have the second half of the season that they should have?
Well, I mean, obviously losing Kershaw for as long as they have, that's trouble. But then again, if you get him right for the playoffs, you got Ross Stripling here at his first All-Star game. You've got Walker Buehler, who's absolutely having a tremendous year, and Clayton Kershaw. And you have Jose Urias in the minor leagues. So if you think about bringing him up, that's almost like getting a frontline starter at the deadline. I got a chance to talk to Dave Roberts the other day when we were in L.A., and he's so excited for the second half. I mean, obviously they've gone through some struggles. Obviously there have been some great stories like Max Muncy, who's really kind of come on the scene, just like Cody Bellinger did last year, and really provided that energy, that spark that lineup needed. But I think just in general, it's all about consistency and staying healthy.
Could Machado be a Dodger?
Of course. I think he can go anywhere right now. I don't even know where the front line is. The problem is with the Baltimore Orioles that they had so many great offers in January, and they waited. And now his worth has gone down. So now it just kind of depends on who's going to give the Baltimore Orioles what they want. Because I'm sure they want some ready guys and they want some prospects. It's just all about who's going to give up who.
Less optimism you could not possibly have talking about the second half of the season. All right, just quickly, World Series, who do you like right now? You seem to think every single team is out there.
You know what? I mean, obviously, I think in my mind, I think it boils down to the Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees, although the Cleveland Indians are having a tremendous season, which I really, really enjoy watching those guys play.
And the defending champion Astros are like, we got
Houston
four
Astros.
number one pitchers.
I know, it's
Literally
crazy,
only
man.
going to be two teams.
I tell you what, if the Houston Astros can find some bullpen help, obviously Rendon has done a great job stepping in for Giles there on the back end. They have a really good chance. And on the National League side, I think it's either the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Chicago Cubs.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good.
Exciting second half of the season.
Let's go, man. We're ready.
Get in the cage, bro.
I wish, man. I wish this thing was a jersey, bro, but it's not. It's just
Nick Swisher, thank
Hey,
you
what is
so
this? What
much.
is that little bunny right there?
Little psycho bunny right here.
That's a great brand, see?
like that?
I'll get you one of those polos,
you know
man.
what? I know a guy, bro. I'm gonna hook
That
you
size?
up. I'm gonna hook you up.
You say I don't buy you. No. Let me get it. See,
No,
gives
no.
me trouble
We
on
got
Twitter.
to
Says
take
I
a
don't buy him
break.
no
Much more
presents
first things
anymore.
first right after
Like
this.
an old married couple. Said he forgot. I forgot the anniversary this year.
Welcome back to First Things First. Live from Nationals Park. Oh boy, we got some extra guests coming your way. Hall of Famers Dave Winfield and John Smoltz are stopping by. And the commissioner, Rob Manfred, will all be here. First things first from our nation's capital. All right, guys, want to play some Take Your Pick?
Oh, I would love nothing more.
Really?
Let's do it.
Nothing more?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Kyle Schwarber was in a groove in last night's home run derby, and his bat flip proved it. But not to be outdone, Bryce Harper had one of his own on the derby winner. So who had the better bat flip last night? Was it Schwarber or Harper? CC, take your pick.
I got to go with Kyle. I like it. I mean, he got the party started because, man, his first round, man, he got the energy going. It's also, Jenna, him and I are from the same high school. He's got a little football mentality. He was an all-Ohio football player when he was at Middletown High School, so I'm going with Kyle, my hometown.
I figured you'd go with your hometown guy, and I understand it's a great bat flip. But nothing's better than the Bryce Harper bat flip because it's a walk-off bat flip. Because when you have a bat flip, that's not even a bat flip. It's just like a two-handed toss into the heavens because you just won the home run derby. That's good. Look at it. He knows he got it.
I'm surprised one of the pitchers didn't come out and start fighting him.
No. His dad comes out and hits, showing him up. That was perfect. Two-handed, toss to the heavens for the hometown crowd. Go get it, Bryce.
I bet you a ton of people start naming their kids Harper after this. Oh, hold on.
That's one of Jenna's daughters' names.
That's one of my daughter's names. You probably know. Moving on to tonight's All-Star game on Fox. Mike Trout and Bryce Harper will be front and center with all the biggest names in the game under one roof. Who's more likely to win All-Star MVP tonight? Is it Trout or Harper? This time, Nick, you take your pick.
I'm going clean sweep. Bryce Harper. This whole weekend's going to be their whole All-Star festivities. Bryce Harper weekend. It's in his park. He had the amazing comeback in the home run derby. Now, I checked the line. The National League a slight underdog today. They give the All-Star MVP to someone on the winning team almost always. So, need a slight upset for this to happen. But I say Bryce Harper. Home run derby and All-Star MVP.
Wow.
I believe he lost a lot of energy last night. Very humid night for a guy to go through several rounds of the home run derby. I'm going with the best player in baseball, and that being Mike Trout. All right? I believe that Mike Trout and his swing will hold up compared to the big loopy home run swing of Bryce Harper.
we are back from a couple days in D.C. Great little MLB All-Star action, and we came back to big NBA news. It looks like Kawhi Leonard is heading to the Toronto Raptors. We'll get to what that means for the Lakers, what it means for the Spurs guys, but we'll start with some details of the reported deal. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, San Antonio and Toronto are finalizing a trade to swap Kawhi for DeMar DeRozan this morning. But just to complicate things, Chris Haynes is reporting something Cece's been saying all along. Kawhi has zero desire to play in Toronto. So, Chris, what do you make of all this that is going down today? Looks like it's happening as we speak.
There was always the potential he could be traded somewhere where he didn't want to go. San Antonio, from the beginning, said that they prefer to trade him to the East compared to trading him to the West. That was at the beginning. And then we heard San Antonio say, you know, we're going to try to make a good deal. It might be in the West, might be in the East. They didn't say it had to be East or West. But knowing in the business, no one, especially with San Antonio's success, with Greg Popovich's success, who in the West, you know, is he trying to make better? He's going to be coaching 2 more seasons. He's coaching USA basketball. This is his swan song. Why would he, a legendary franchise, best probably in basketball, them and the Celtics, the Lakers, why would I help Magic Johnson to be able to resurrect that team? No, I didn't think San Antonio, it wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be more by default. Either Boston, Philadelphia, and now we have Toronto that got into the mix. So they're trying to fetch a deal for Kawhi.
And they were, just real quick to add some to that, they were open to trading, and I guess technically still are because it's not a done deal yet. They were open to trading Kawhi to the Lakers. We know that, but we know what they asked for. They asked for every young player on the roster except for Lonzo Ball and essentially four first-round picks. Yeah. 2 outright first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. So they were open to it. But they wanted more than the King's ransom. They wanted a King's ransom and future King's ransoms via the picks. Go ahead, Steve.
So it still becomes very, very difficult. I don't think it's a done deal. I know we're reporting on what other people are saying, but trading players and picks is just one aspect of a trade. There's other aspects. The other one being, will he pass a physical? Will a guy show up? So, yeah, they could trade for Kawhi, but what Kawhi is going to do from this point, I've been very consistent as far as the message. He wanted to go to Los Angeles, that being the Clippers and the Lakers. I didn't think any other team, regardless of what type of talent, coaching staff, or where they were, had a chance of landing Kawhi based on the information that I was getting.
Here's the thing, though. Unless Kawhi is willing to do something that we haven't seen an NBA player do in my lifetime, which is essentially sit out 2 years, one of which where he is ostensibly healthy, because the Kawhi Leonard report that I thought we were going to be talking about today was the one from 12 hours ago, not 1 hour ago, which was that he might show up to USA basketball training camp. Might show up and let people see his level of health publicly, which we hadn't seen since his 9-game stint this season.
He is indeed healthy.
That he would be able to play. And so, unless Kawhi would be willing to take the furthest possible conclusion, a true nuclear option, he doesn't have much of a say on where he will play next season. All he could do is cool the market by making it very clear wherever I play next season will have no impact on where I'm playing in 2 seasons.
And he has made that very clear.
In 2 seasons, I'm playing in Los Angeles. And that's why it would appear the Celtics and the Sixers, maybe even the Lakers, didn't make their best offer. But it's also why this move, to me, would make sense for Toronto. Toronto was saying, we won 59 games last year and it wasn't good enough. We are going to switch out our best player, who plays the same position as Kawhi Leonard, essentially, is scoring wing,
yes,
with a better version of our best player. Everything at basketball, Kawhi Leonard is better than DeMar DeRozan. Kawhi Leonard's a better...
Every aspect.
Every aspect. Kawhi Leonard's a better mid-range shooter.
Yep.
He's a far better deep shooter, three-point shooter. He's obviously a better defender. Neither one's known as a great playmaker. So you are getting a better version of your best player. And if you're the Raptors and you've never made an NBA Finals in the history of your team, and LeBron James is now gone from the conference, I do understand why they would say, you know what? We trade for Kawhi. maybe there's the 1 in 100 chance he stays. But if he doesn't, we'll go for it this year with arguably the best player in the conference once we get him, and then we get to restart. We're going to have most of our young pieces. My guess is the trade that the Raptors would like to make is Kawhi, OG Anunoby, and this year's first-round pick. And which first-round pick is important? Because this year's first-round pick, they would think, well, that's going to be not a good pick because we're going to have Kawhi Leonard. We're going to be at the top of the conference. Future first-round picks would be more attractive to San Antonio, less attractive for Toronto, because after this year, I think they start a rebuild in Toronto if this trade goes through.
And what does this mean for San Antonio? What can San Antonio do with a guy like DeMar DeRozan in their lineup?
Well, I'm not certain that the trade is going to go through. He's not the type of player that San Antonio's had before, one-dimensional offensive player, doesn't shoot the three well, is more of a mid-range, which is kind of almost obsolete in the NBA. But with Popovich only being there 2 more years, they do have an all-star that with LaMarcus Aldridge, it allows them to be competitive. They will be a playoff team. So that's about as much as far as I can break it down. There's no championship aspiration in San Antonio with DeRozan compared to having Kawhi there.
So do you think San Antonio could have gotten a better offer had they shopped this around a little bit more? Because it seems like if Toronto
it's impossible to shop it around more. Everyone in the league, everyone in the universe knows about this. All right? And Kawhi's demands held down what the offers would be. So San Antonio is doing the best that they can do with a very, very tough market and a tough player to trade because of his demands.
But if San Antonio was putting the message out, then maybe some of the other, I mean, Toronto obviously didn't listen. Toronto was like, okay, we get that. We're in for 1 year.
I think you have to recognize different incentive structures. And I think you have to recognize that not every team in the NBA is trying to win a championship next year. And that's a critical piece. There is, hanging over every NBA conversation we have is the specter of the Golden State Warriors. And if you already thought the Warriors were the most talented team we'd seen, and then they added DeMarcus Cousins, and you thought you were on the precipice of contending, and then the best team in the league got better. They improved their worst position to arguably the best guy in the league at that position. Maybe you're saying, we can't win a title next year. So why would we give up anything down the road? For Toronto, to me, is a very interesting fit, and it's what I brought up last week. The fact that Kawhi...
Does this move right here, and even though people would think that, okay, yeah, they might be the best team in the East, but does this give them some type of parachute that if the case they want to rebuild or blow up the whole team?
That's the reason why for Toronto, you sell to your fans we got better.
Yes.
We went from 59 wins, and we are still trying to go win.
You have the best player in the East.
You got I would say Giannis, but sure. They will say we have the best player in the East. They certainly have a top 2 player in the East. We are going for it. We're going for it. And then maybe you make your first NBA Finals ever. But whatever happens, then Kawhi leaves. Then all of a sudden, oh, wait, Lowry, Ibaka, and Valanciunas will all be on expiring deals next year. You have Siakam. You have Fred VanVleet. You have all your own draft picks moving forward. And then you can sell to your fans more easily. Listen, we went for it. We got as far as we went. DeRozan's contract is off the books, which I think, given his limitations in today's NBA that C alluded to, is probably a guy you don't want to be paying $30 million a year to. Those guys become expiring deals, and you get to reboot it. So Toronto was a team that Kawhi only playing for a year didn't really scare them. Listen, I think if this trade goes through, Philly and Boston, there's going to be meetings in the general manager's office. Philly doesn't. The general manager's office empty in Philly, but whatever office they go to,
should we have taken this a little more seriously?
Did we miss an opportunity here? If we're Boston, is the 10% chance that Boogie made the Warriors worse? Should we have bet on that? Like, should we have put Jaylen Brown out there?
Sure.
And there'll obviously be conversations in Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka's office.
All right, once again, our top story, the Spurs and the Raptors finalizing a deal that would send Kawhi Leonard to Toronto for DeMar DeRozan. We'll talk much more about that. But on the other side, we'll talk a little bit of football. A former Patriot is now making more money than any current Patriot. That's next on First Things First. New topic. Here we go. Patriots trading receiver Brandon Cooks to the Rams back in April. We assume the Pats didn't think he was worth the money to keep him. The Rams certainly do. Los Angeles signing Cooks to a 5-year, $80 million extension that'll keep him a Ram through the 2023 season. Cook's coming off 3 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Also played with perhaps the 2 best quarterbacks of all time with Breeze and Brady. CC, what was your reaction to Cook's deal with the Rams?
Not surprised. When the Rams traded for him, he was in the option year. He was already making $8 million. He's a young guy. He's a speed guy. If you can put together in this NFL consecutive 1,000-yard season, if you can put together 3 or 4 of them, you're going to get, if you're a starting receiver, you're going to get $12 to $15 million a year. The market has been set by the wide receivers at the top, so people might look at this deal and be astonished, but no. There's plenty of wide receivers out there making this type of money, and there's a bunch of wide receivers right behind the next year, year and a half, that will be making $18 to potentially $20 million. So I think the Rams did the right thing. You can't look at the length of this contract and the average to really know what it's about. This is really a 3-year deal. Most of these deals are 3-year deals. This is a 6-year deal for $88 million, about 14, a little less than 15 million a year. So that's what it takes to get a starting number 1 wide receiver. Even if you don't believe he is a number 1, this is the going rate for wide receivers in the marketplace now.
And the reason CC calls it a 6-year $88 million instead of 5-year $80, as it's being reported as, is it's 5 years $80 being tacked on to the 1 year at $8 he already has. So it's a 5-year $80 million extension.
Yeah, I would have been happy if they had torn up the last year. That's what I would have done. You got to eat that last year.
Well, as the player,
6 years in pro football, sign a contract for 6 years. He is never. I can guarantee you. Mark my words today. He will not make it to the end of that contract.
Right, you're saying not necessarily he won't still be in the league, but that he will be on either a different team.
The contract is structured that way.
Right, to where you have an out. That's why when we heard, by the way, the Le'Veon Bell, that he was offered 5 years, 70, it's always about the structure. When is the out years for the team, essentially? C's right that we should have seen this coming. When you trade a first-round pick for a player who's only got 1 year left on his deal in the NFL.
And he's a first-rounder, so that 5th-year option is totally different. It's a high price.
Right.
It's not like you're just getting a guy in the last year of his contract. You're like, the guy's making $400,000. No, the guy's making $8 million.
And so they traded away a high-value pick, the 23rd pick of the draft, to get him. Now, if I were the Rams, would I have operated with a little more trepidation than they seem to? Would I have wanted to see him with a quarterback who is not Drew Brees or Tom Brady? And see his level of effectiveness? Would I have wanted to see when his biggest skill is basically the 9 route, catching the deep ball, and that is what Jared Goff's biggest weakness is? Would that make me a little nervous? The fact that I know Todd Gurley's got to get his money, Aaron Donald's getting his money. You traded also for Marcus Peters. He's ostensibly going to get his money. All those things would make me a little nervous at paying him at this price, but when you trade the first-round pick, that's the price. You're going to extend him. You're not going to trade the 23rd pick of the draft for 1 year of Brandon Cooks. So I did see it coming. I do think that there are players across the league at his position that love seeing this. And then, of course, there's Le'Veon Bell saying, you got to be kidding me. There's running backs across the league saying, what is happening where?
Well, the running backs need to be watching the running backs and not watching the wide receivers. You can't watch another position and think that it's going to help you with your contract. It's been that way for years in the NFL. The running backs, they're not nearly as high regarded as the wide receivers, and the money reflects that. And the amount, if you look at the 10 wide receivers that are getting between $17 and $14 million, so he no need to look at Brandon Cook's contract. You can look at all the wide receiver contract. It's a position that would warrant paying more money than any of the running backs.
So can I ask you about that? This is the thing I don't understand. Why, when we're evaluating players and their contracts, I understand why quarterbacks have to be in a totally different bucket, so throw them out. But why, when we're evaluating players and contracts, are we just comparing them to guys at their position rather than impact on the game? Because the NFL has said, what you described there is totally accurate, that wide receivers are judged against wide receivers. So when the top paid wide receiver makes around $17 million a year, that's why a guy like Albert Wilson, who played for my favorite team last year, the Kansas City Chiefs, I did not think was an impact guy in the least, goes out in free agency and gets $8 million a year, a contract that would make him, as a running back, the top-paid running back in the league other than Le'Veon Bell.
Who doesn't clearly have as big of an impact on his team
I
as
would
a guy
argue,
like Le'Veon Bell.
I would argue Brandon Cooks doesn't have nearly as big of a... If I heard this offseason, the Patriots, instead of trading Cooks for a first-round pick, traded Cooks for Bell, I'd be like, wow, the Pats got a lot better. Why are from offensive skill position players, why are the contracts not looked at by impact? How much added value does he add to your offense? Why does it have to be running backs make what running backs make, wide receivers make what wide receivers make? I don't get the logic of that.
I don't make the rules. I just play by the rules, all right? And what we've seen with running backs, you have been able to get that productivity from cheaper sources. That being, you don't have to spend a high draft pick on a running back. You can find a running back anywhere in the draft. And the league has shown that you can utilize free agents or several guys at the position. Wide receivers, if you want a top-flight guy, you're going to have to be able to pay for it. And the drop-off from a top-flight wide receiver, which I believe is critical to your offense compared to a top-flight running back and the productivity you can get through other positions and through calling plays, I believe it's easier to replace that productivity than it is from a wide receiver.
Is it hard? Is it just too hard to quantify impact on a team?
Impact is a variable that no one can give you a definition on.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Maybe it's just a difficult way to kind of bridge the gap or to blur the lines.
Listen,
between
I think
positions.
teams know out there that the top running backs in the league are more impactful than a guy like, I don't know, Dante Moncrief, who makes almost $10 million a year. I think guys know that. I think just objectively you know that. C's right that that's not how they're evaluating the position, and the Rams knew when they traded for him they were going to have to give him this type of deal. There's the other butterfly effect of this. You know who's in the same draft class as Brandon Cooks? Odell Beckham Jr. You know who also this year is playing on his fifth-year option? Odell Beckham Jr. He's not on his third different team. He's not on his third different quarterback. He's in the same team, same quarterback, and no matter what you think of Brandon Cooks, who's a good player, he is not the caliber of player of Odell. And Cooks got, now, Odell wants a slightly bigger deal than the one Cooks got, but what are we talking about Odell wanting? $18 million a year?
Of course.
And Cooks
well,
just
the highest paid guy's making $17 million. Yes.
And so, I mean, and Cooks just got $16 million a year as an extension. So I think while L. Bell maybe sees this, says, you got to be kidding me, Odell sees this and said, that's awesome. That's a guy from my draft class, at my position, who I'm better than, who just
I think there's other guys that, Jarvis Landry, if you look at who has come and got signed, all these guys have something that's going to help OBJ. It's just not one guy. You got 10 guys making above $14 million.
I agree. There's a long precedent, but the point that I'm making is this is the first guy at his position in his draft class.
Yeah, but I don't care. I'm trying to get removed from my draft class. I'm trying to be the highest paid guy. I don't want to be compared to Brandon Cooks and Landry. All right, so I don't believe it helps him as much when you're trying to be the top paid, because you don't bring those guys up. You only bring up the top guys. You don't want to be compared to Brandon Cooks.
Would you not, in the negotiation, if they had offered you, if the Giants had offered him, their last offer was 5 years, $80 million, would you not bring up Brandon Cooks in this regard? Only now. Like, hold on. You guys just offered me 5 years, 80. That's just what he got. We know I'm better than
the Giants are not going to offer OBJ the same contracts as Brandon Cook. There's no need to have Brandon Cooks as a talking point. There's no comparison between the two players besides the time that they came into the league. If I was OBJ, I would move the conversation. This is not about him. This is about Antonio. This is about Julio, who's trying to get a new contract because he's making less than Brandon Cooks now. So that's what the conversation should be about, his age and these other guys and what they've accomplished.
All right, let's take a break there. On the other side, let's get back to our top story. How much would Kawhi in the East affect the Lakers in the West? That's next. This is First Things First. This Friday on FS1, the Big Three is live from Miami. Catch it all on FS1 at 8 p.m. Eastern or stream it on the Fox Sports app.
It's been very fun early season in the Big Three. Catch it this Friday.
All right, we're now going viral here on First Things First. Last night, two-time MVP, seven-time All-Star Mike Trout went yard in the All-Star game and enjoyed his overall experience. After the game, he hopped on Twitter, posted a selfie with Yankee slugger Aaron Judge and Red Sox outfielder Mookie Betts. The caption read, quote, always something special, hashtag All-Star game. Thank you for the hospitality.
But
DC.
this is, sorry to interrupt, Jenna. The coolest part of Trout was finding out Mike Trout and our guy Cece share a common interest outside of sports. Both budding weathermen in their off time. He was asked about the storm that was coming. Evidently, I didn't know it until last night. Did you know this about Mike Trout?
Didn't know it.
That he's much like you, a weather enthusiast. He goes on Weather Channel, evidently in the off season sometimes, on the Weather Channel, and he gave an accurate forecast. Like, I think it's going to rain a little bit longer. I don't think the game's going to stop. I think it's going to storm's going to move.
There's a large mass over the area. I think it will go through.
I had no idea. I didn't know this was a little thing that some elite athletes in their spare time. Meteorology.
People are obsessed with the Weather Channel. They will sit and just watch it like it's entertainment.
See,
Not in a
you
bad way.
said
See, you want to glean some
said you had a
information from it.
communications degree from Ohio State. I think you've been lying, or communications was your focus at Ohio State.
Meteorology?
I think you're lying to us. I think it was meteorology. I think that's where that's the fork in the road moment for you. When you were leaving school, not leaving school, meteorology could have been where you went.
I'm shocked that you guys are shocked that I would have interest in the weather when I had a job for almost 20 years that was outside.
That was outdoors?
Good point.
Fair enough. I get that part of it.
Like, if you were coming to the office and you knew you had to go outside and work out for at least 3 to 4 hours, would you check the weather?
Yeah, but here's the thing. You no longer have that job. You're checking weather in cities you don't live in. You're checking. It's the #1 app on your phone. I know this. You can't act like it was just job related. Deep-seated as a child, a young Chris Carter thought one day he might be, what is it? Who's the Al Roker?
Al Roker.
There you go. Instead, you went and became Chris Carter. I'm just saying, I feel like I know that about you. Mike Trout has that in common.
Yes, you and Mike Trout, budding meteorologists.
That was me, watching the Today Show, trying to be Al Roker. That was me.
Time for some stories to start your morning, brought to you by the unexpected energy of ExxonMobil. Sticking with the MLB All-Star game, it looked more like the home run derby. Two teams combining for a record 10 home runs. The American League went on to beat the National League 8-6 in 10 innings. Nick, how exciting was the All-Star game in D.C.?
It was a great game. It was, for good or for bad, it was what baseball has been this year. Whole bunch of strikeouts, whole bunch of home runs. There was, 13 runs scored in this game? Or 14 runs, 13 of which were via the long ball, 25 strikeouts between the two sides. It was an exciting game, and much like last regular season, it ended with an Astro winning MVP. The All-Star game ended with that as well.
Yeah, a lot like Smoltzy talked about as a guest on our show, called the game last night on Fox. This is baseball now. Young kids, it's about launch angle. It's about throwing it hard every time. That's why you have the gun up there for the pitchers, exciting, and how far can I hit it. It's not a lot of base hits, not a lot of doubles, not a lot of sacrifice. Hey, move the guy over. Old school baseball is gone. This is what, get used to this, the long ball.
Yep. All right, speaking of All-Stars.
And they say, Jenna, chicks like the long ball.
Chicks take the long ball.
Yes, we do. According to reports, the Orioles have a deal in place for Manny Machado to be traded to the Dodgers.
Oh.
Machado would be jumping from a team in last place to a team at the top of their division. See, would Machado make the Dodgers World Series contenders?
Yeah, well, the Dodgers are going to contend for a World Series even without him. Now, they could use a shortstop. They do have a hole there in their lineup, and they also could use his bat. But when you look at the firepower at Houston, you better add someone like him to your lineup. Absolutely. It puts the Dodgers right where they need to be. The Dodgers and the Braves, they are teams probably that have overachieved more in the first half of the season for Major League Baseball than any other teams, given the injuries that the Dodgers have.
So that's the critical point, because the Dodgers have a worse record of the break than you would have thought going into the season. So you'd say they'd underachieved, but knowing the injuries they had, knowing that Kershaw hadn't been in there, they're already contenders. He would make them, to me, the favorites in the NL.
All right, let's move on to some football. Entering his 15th season with the Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald has no intentions of taking his talents elsewhere. Fitzgerald said, quote, "If I'm not playing in Arizona, I won't be playing anywhere." Chris, how much do you respect Fitzgerald's loyalty to one team there, the Cardinals?
Yeah, he's committed to this area. He does all his charity work there. Has really established himself in the community. The Bidwell family, who own the Cardinals, have been very, very good to Larry Fitzgerald. I wouldn't be surprised if Larry was one of the few players that moved from on the playing field to some front office or potential ownership position within the next several years if he didn't get into broadcast. He's a kid who's got a lot of options, and he's got a lot of money. But the relationship with Michael Bidwell, I believe you can hear it in this conversation. He will never play for another team, not even his favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings.
And listen, this is obviously an all-time great. A couple days ago, I kind of impromptu, you asked me my top 5 wide receivers ever. And I said Jerry, Chris, Randy, and T.O. And then I said there's an argument for who could be 5th on that list. He's in that argument already, whether he stopped playing right now and he's one of the best people in the NFL. I don't think guys have to spend their whole career with one team, obviously, but it's nice occasionally when guys do, and Larry's going to be one of those guys.
All right, finally, Randy Gregory is getting a new lease on football life. The NFL reinstated the Cowboys' defensive end Tuesday on a conditional basis. He's allowed to be at camp, but he's not yet cleared to practice. He missed 30 of the last 32 games for multiple violations of the league's substance abuse policy. Gregory says the reinstatement is a blessing and he's, quote, a totally different person. CeCe, how happy are you with this decision?
I'm very satisfied that he's going to get the opportunity to be able to get a second, third, or fourth chance in life. The National Football League, they have worked with Randy and his family to try to get him as healthy as possible. And this is as healthy as he has been since he's entered the NFL from his days of playing football at the University of Nebraska. He was red flagged on a drug test when he came into the league, so he has been an issue with the NFL and his involvement with the drug program since he came in. Over the last year, he's been able to stay clean. He was able to spend a substantial amount of time in a facility I'm very, very familiar with in California. I've been in communication with him for a long period of time, him and his family. I'm trying to help him understand some of the things that he would need to as far as substance abuse and alcohol addiction moving forward in his life. And also, I can proudly say that I watched his recovery. I did have confidence in his recovery, that enough confidence that I would write a letter to the NFL to help support him coming back into the league. I've only written a letter for several players. I've been involved with a lot of players as far as their overall rehab. So this is very, very tough for me because once you go in, this is very hard because if he flunks another test, his career is probably going to be over, but his life won't be over. So I try to attach myself to him to try to help him out, to give him the power to be able to make good decisions that he can have a long and successful life. I really don't care that much about the football. I care more about his life. Is he an asset to a football team? Yes. So I hope I hope he continues to make the right decisions. But, man, with addiction, it's 24 hours, man. I hope he has a good day today. If he gets through the day, then he can make it through another day. But that is the real struggle. And he's going through it on a daily basis. He is not out of the woods by no stretch of imagination.
From a football angle, I do have this question, not about his impact on the field, but about the NFL's evolution in this process. Is it fair to say that let's say his career, just take everything that happened to him and put it 5 years in the past or 10 years in the past, the failed drug tests, all of that his career would have been over? That the NFL has evolved at least somewhat in the ability to give guys...
They're trying to, and the collective bargaining agreement has helped them because they've changed the language in the collective bargaining agreement around Josh Gordon when we saw Josh with the continued abuse and missing tests and being suspended from the league, that they have kind of dialed it back a little bit. So the players are fined game checks before they're actually suspended. So there's a couple different levels before the public even knows that a guy has a situation.
And you got to give a little credit to Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, who have stuck with him and wanted to give him chance after chance, and now seemingly believing in him and wanting to give him yet another one.
Jerry Jones is one of the best proponents for overall mental health and wellness, and overall as far as addiction, drugs, and alcohol. Jerry Jones for a long, long time, and a lot of reason why the players for Dallas for a long time love Jerry is because Jerry has always taken a personal interest in guys, in the ugly stories. Jerry, he embraces that part, and he has helped so many athletes out that we don't even know about. But Randy couldn't have gotten the help without Jerry. So you got to be able to give Jerry a lot of credit for Randy and his decision-making.
Yeah, we do wish him all the best of luck. All right, back now to our big story this morning. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, the Spurs and the Raptors are finalizing a trade to swap Kawhi Leonard for DeMar DeRozan. The big twist in this one, Kawhi apparently has no interest in playing for Toronto, something CeCe's been saying for a while now. But let's focus on one of the teams Kawhi wanted to play for. Chris, what does this mean now for the Lakers?
Well, first you have to be able to see if the deal is going to go through.
Assuming it does.
If Kawhi Leonard's going to play for the Lakers, I believe that. He's going to play for the Lakers no matter when he's going to get there. Toronto, even if they do trade for him, they can't hold him. All right, he's got one more year left on his contract. He can leave. They can't protect him. There's nothing that they can do. That is the desire of Kawhi Leonard. Now, we knew all along that San Antonio could trade him, and you would have a situation where you would have a showdown. And that's what they decide. If they make this trade, that's what you're going to have. Toronto has not talked to Kawhi. All right, so in the process of trying to trade for him, they're going to have to try to convince Kawhi to come to Toronto for 1 year. Now, everything that I've heard, all my intel up to this moment would tell me that Kawhi is not, he's not entertaining 1 year deals. Paul George, what it was communicated to me was the Paul George deal is not going to happen. You're not going to rent Kawhi for a year and try to win him over and think that he's going to sign there.
What is the alternative, sitting out? If he doesn't want to entertain Toronto for 1 year, what options?
Yeah, not showing up for his physical and sitting out.
Is that on the table?
I haven't heard that part. That part we'll have to hear about because now we didn't know that someone would trade for him. But if Kawhi is going to continue on the path that he's on, saying that I only want to play in Los Angeles, that's what he's going to have to do next.
And I think he's got a bit of an out in this regard. Because we have heard from repeatedly the Paul George situation's not on the table. And that can be couched as, well, it's not the Paul George situation as far as trading for me and convincing me. I would be dumbfounded if anyone were to trade for Kawhi and Kawhi sits out a season. That would shock me as someone that's covered sports my whole life, that's watched the NBA my whole life. That would shock me. And I also believe, even though DeMar DeRozan's here on Instagram, he's saying the Raptors came to me and said they weren't going to trade me at Summer League. The Raptors actually did a press conference yesterday. They said, we meant to say would, not wouldn't. That's what happened there. But the Raptors said we weren't going to trade him at Summer League.
So what about the end of the meeting when you shake the guy's hand and say, oh, we on the same page?
It's tough. It's a tough business, man.
That's what I learned from both of you. Business. It's tough business.
No, that's a flat lie. That's not business. That's just a lie. All right? They're trying to protect themselves. They told him to his face, you're not going to get traded. And they changed their mind. Or they didn't have the guts to tell him. Those are the only two options.
And but for the Lakers, though, because this is where I thought Kawhi was going to go this year. For the Lakers, you can spin a happy face on this. And you can say, okay, as long as we get him next year, now we keep all our guys. Yeah. Now, I've said how I think it's harder for them to bring in a third star if they don't have Kawhi already in the building, if they have to sign Kawhi Leonard in the offseason and bring in somebody else. I also think that you don't know how many years you have as LeBron, as the best player in the league. You feel like over the course of his contract, he's the whole time going to be one of the best players in the league. And while I don't think it's likely, I saw Kobe Bryant be 26, 6, and 5, one of the best players in the league, and then snap his Achilles, and he went from one of the best players to never being an all-star caliber player again. I don't think that's going to happen. I do know that the Lakers have operated this offseason like they thought they were going to get him. But we don't have to make our best offer yet. We can wait out San Antonio. Because while I would be shocked if Kawhi were to be traded and not report to that team, I wouldn't have been shocked if the Spurs held on to him and Kawhi didn't report back to San Antonio. That I have seen. I have seen a guy say, I'm not playing for this team anymore. And so I think the Lakers thought they had leverage in that regard, especially when you saw the Sixers won't even offer Fultz. The Celtics won't even offer Jaylen Brown. And so if you're Los Angeles, now this is a year, if you don't have Kawhi Leonard, where you can't even squint and pretend you can be contending with the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, I believe that the demands of San Antonio going to Los Angeles were too high. If you look at the 3 players that they wanted, the 2 draft picks and 2 swaps. So it's not the Lakers' fault. San Antonio came in with high demands. They got good young players. They have draft picks, and they basically wanted them all. So the Lakers, they can look at it. They need to watch and see how Kawhi is going to respond to this to see what they're going to do. But the Lakers, they didn't make a bad move, and Kawhi is still available for them in the future.
So if this deal goes through, this is the Lakers team as it currently stands heading into this year.
If this deal goes through, they're basically out of cap space except for a taxpayer, except for one of their exceptions. They've got guys on one-year deals. The attractive trade pieces they have are young guys that they didn't even want to get rid of for Kawhi Leonard. So you're not going to trade for a B-level player. Like, it's going to be LeBron and the kids. It's going to be, let's see how good Ingram gets. Let's see how good Kuzma gets. Let's see if what we saw from Josh Hart in Summer League, which was something of a revelation. Let's see how Lonzo responds to the scope he just had. And it's going to be LeBron and the kids. And, I mean, that's going to be fun to watch. That's going to be interesting.
But it's a different team than a couple months ago when the possibility was there for the three guys we thought that could potentially all play together, which was Paul George and Kawhi and LeBron. Now they'll move forward with LeBron.
Let's not forget Magic Johnson's words. Have patience. This free agency is not about 1 year. All right, we're in this for the long haul, so there's no need to panic. There was a great chance that Kawhi could be traded somewhere else, but his contract status still didn't change. He's going to be a free agent after the season.
Okay, let's take a break. Coming up on the other side, more on the Kawhi deal. Are the Raptors making a mistake? That's next on First Things First. Back here at First Things First, we're joined by former NBA head coach Stu Jackson. Stu, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good to see you.
We got a lot to talk about this morning.
Rumor has it they threw you in the trade. You used to be able to play a little bit. They threw you in.
Chris, I can't get buckets anymore.
Okay, all right. But there was a day.
Let's keep it real here this morning.
Let's talk about it. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, San Antonio and Toronto are finalizing a trade to swap Kawhi Leonard for DeMar DeRozan. But don't get too excited. CC's been saying all along Kawhi doesn't want to play in Toronto. It appears, according to his Twitter feed, DeMar DeRozan doesn't really want to play in San Antonio. Both now widely being reported. Stu, what would trading for Kawhi, would it be a bad move for the Toronto Raptors?
Yeah, I think it's a bad move on a number of fronts. So number one, you have to look at the situation with DeMar DeRozan. I mean, here's a young man that agreed to go back to Toronto and sign with them long term. So in the eyes of the Toronto franchise and all the players in the league, I think that that's a bad move. But now you're getting Kawhi Leonard, who is unhappy. He's unhappy with his move, as is DeMar DeRozan. You're basically renting him for 1 season. It's a large risk for the Toronto Raptors. You get Kawhi Leonard for 1 year in hopes that you get to the NBA Finals. If you don't, he leaves, he bolts, and I agree with you, Chris, he bolts for L.A., okay? So now, what's on the other side for Toronto? You're in rebuild mode. So you rent a player for 1 year. On the other side, you're in a rebuild mode. It's just a bad move and a very high risk, I think, for the Toronto Raptors.
Listen, I think the argument about lying to DeMar DeRozan, as is being reported, is what happened. I mean, that's a harsh way of putting it. I think it's if you tell him a few days ago, we're not trading you, and now you're in discussions to do exactly that, you mislead, deceive. I think lie is a fair word to use. And the ripple effect with agents, with players, with guys wanting to come there, that's a legitimate concern. The reason that I disagree with the rebuild part being bad is I think going for it for 1 year and then rebuilding is a better alternative to what they would have if they stick with the status quo, which is good but not good enough. Go ahead.
No, but, what you're saying is, okay, Kawhi Leonard is going to exponentially be that much better than DeMar DeRozan. Listen, Toronto Raptors have not gotten out of the Eastern Conference for a couple reasons. One is offensively, they changed themselves last year to a team that was more pass-oriented.
Yeah, until they got to the playoffs.
Until they got to the playoffs. So they haven't taken that next step. And until they change the way that they play, and that becomes part of their offensive DNA, they're not going to win the Eastern Conference. So does Kawhi Leonard bring that to you? I don't know.
But you said there's a couple reasons. The other reason the Raptors haven't gotten through the East is because of LeBron James. He's gone now.
Right, and that's the reason why I believe they're making a mistake. LeBron is gone. The monster's gone. Like, why I want to rebuild my team, and the guy that's been destroying us, he's gone to the West. Why don't I stay intact? Because let's not forget, man, they got a juggernaut in Boston. We see what they got in Philadelphia. You trying to rebuild after the commitment that you said, that whole commitment, the general manager said, we're going to go back to Lowry. We're going to go back to DeRozan. We're going to bring the coach back. Man, how long did that last? LeBron crushed that in the series there. So they totally gave up. They got rid of the coach. Now they're getting ready to get rid of their star and rebuild in Canada. You know how hard it is For them to get that basketball product the way it is now, to totally rebuild, that is not a normal NBA city, what they're doing there in Toronto. That's why I believe it's a bad move.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. Listen, I mean, the Boston Celtics with a healthy Kyrie Irving
and Gordon Hayward, maybe.
The Toronto Raptors are not going to beat the Boston Celtics for some of the same reasons we just talked about. You're talking about a Boston Celtics team that is defensive-minded.
Yep.
Offensively, they really have no selfishness on that team. They move the basketball. They're playoff ready, to me, and they're ready to take that next step. You have Philadelphia lurking in the wings. I don't think Toronto beats either of those teams if they get to the conference final.
Wow.
I don't.
Why do we think they would beat us?
And I'll tell you something.
Go ahead.
Nick, the other thing is, as great a player as Kawhi Leonard is, to me, Kawhi Leonard is a manufactured player. This is not a guy.
He's a product of the system.
He's a product of the system, a product, to his credit, of his hard work, his work ethic. You know, he improved his skills. He shoots a jump shot, but inherently, naturally, he's not like Kevin Durant.
Right, but sometimes, listen, sometimes you're a lump of clay, and then an amazing sculptor turns you into David, and then no matter where you go, you're still David. Like, so sometimes you're manufactured, but the manufacturing process is over, and now it's mobile. I look at Toronto and I say this. They won 59 games. They just got better at their best player position. And they can go for it for a season. You're right. I understand top to bottom. Oh, Boston might have a better roster. They do. Philly might have a better roster. But what they won't have is the best player in a series. Toronto would have that. I think they'd have that in every series against the East, except for Milwaukee. And people could argue Kawhi versus Giannis. And so the reason that I think this makes perfect sense for Toronto is if you don't make a move, you're stuck in this purgatory. Because Boston has probably passed you as presently constituted. Philly's catching up. Milwaukee's on their way. And you've got DeRozan for the next 3 years. You got with this move, if Kawhi leaves, you can sell to your fans, we didn't want to rebuild. We went for it. He left. We tried to keep him. And now you have Lowry, Ibaka, and Valanciunas on expiring deals.
Then you still have the image back from Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady. Will a star from United States, will he play basketball in Canada? So you have to realize now that is a thought. All right, my brother coached there in Toronto. Keeping those guys there and bringing a star to Toronto is an issue.
And here's, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And here's a guy, like you said, who doesn't want to play, who's made it very clear he doesn't even want to be there. So now you're starting a
He wanted to
full
go home,
year.
and they're sending him out of the country.
They're sending him as far from home, basically, as you can get.
But Nick, and I hear you. Maybe there's a valid reason and there's a reasonable argument to be had that you go for it for 1 year. But if I told you at the beginning of the year with an elite team, you make a trade with a high-level player who's now going to come to the team with a new coach, albeit he was an assistant there, and now you have to mold this team surrounding an unhappy star who has been off injured. What are the chances of success that team gets to the Eastern Conference Final? I'd have to think that a reasonable, argument would be it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Throw away Philly, throw away Boston. I think the chances of hitting a home run for 1 year are very low, and that's why it's not a good move for them.
I think that the Raptors, as presently constituted, reached their maximum potential. Right?
We wouldn't know that without LeBron being there. I don't think we can determine that. If LeBron hadn't been in the East and they had fallen after having a great regular season, which we thought they utilized more bench players, they had changed their offense. They were playing better defense. But LeBron has been their kryptonite.
That's fair, and LeBron absolutely has been their kryptonite. But the point, we're doing a few things in the East I think we got to be careful about. Before Kyrie got hurt, the Raptors were ahead of Boston in the standings. We do have to recognize that we did see the Raptors and Celtics for 60 games. Now, they didn't have Gordon Hayward. I understand that. But we saw them as they were, and Toronto and Boston were neck and neck. I think if the only year that exists in the NBA is next year, and then the league is going away, and you have the opportunity to swap out DeMar DeRozan and a bench piece, whether it's Siakam or OG Anunoby or whomever, for Kawhi Leonard, you do it. And you go for it. And if you have it, I also think for a franchise that's never been to the finals, the shot of getting to the finals is a real thing. And I'm not sure that Boston is the juggernaut yet, because we've never seen them play together.
I saw the Boston team without their two best players play against LeBron James. And they gave me enough confidence with those young stars because I saw Toronto as constituted. I saw them play against the same team. One team had a real chance. Toronto did not have.
So then why would you run it back, is my question. If they didn't have a chance, why would you run it back? Why would you Toronto stick with the status quo?
Because the beast is gone. It's easy.
Listen, I think it's a question of what Toronto was building, all right? They made their major change in an effort to be different, and that is they switched out their coach. All right? So you're making a statement at that point. We had gotten to a point, we need a new voice. We're going to try to take this next leap with the assistant coach and Nick Nurse, all right? That's it. But you're going to do Nick Nurse and change out your best player for a guy that's coming to Toronto. And by the way, speaking of the Toronto thing, his check's going to be a lot lighter because of the taxes.
Yep.
So you now have a unhappy player who has been injured and who's, unhappy. Look, winning a championship, it's a fine line. You know this. It's a fine line. You not only need the physical, but you need the mental. And now you've got your leader in the locker room, your best player, who has one foot in the water.
And I'll make one argument against what I'm saying that you guys haven't mentioned. And that's DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry being best friends. Those guys do everything together. They do press conferences together. When Kyle Lowry used to be overweight, they used to walk to McDonald's in the middle of the night together and get McFlurries. Like, that is, we've seen DeMar DeRozan and his Instagram story talking about being lied to. We haven't heard yet how Kyle Lowry feels about this whole situation. It's still a chance I would take, but that is an X factor that I'm sure we'll hear more about once Kyle Lowry discusses.
Again, this deal not finalized yet, but definitely inching closer.
Really? McFlurries?
Tomorrow, Big Three basketball is live from Miami. Catch it all on FS1 at 8 Eastern or stream it live on the Fox Sports app. Back here on First Things First, we're going viral. Tiger Woods is in Carnoustie for the Open Championship, the British Open, seeking his 15th major win. That inspired this pretty funny parody from comedian Connor Moore. Take a listen.
Tiger, can we get a quick couple of words off you?
Yeah.
How are you feeling coming into the Open?
Well, conditions are tough, man. But, I think I'm putting well. Really do. And my back feels good. And, yeah, I feel good, man.
Could you elaborate on that, Tiger?
Well, I think I'm putting really well. And conditions are really tough. But, yeah, my back feels really good. And I feel good, man. Really good.
Thanks, Tiger.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Another bombshell there from Tiger Woods.
Yeah, y'all got me stoked, to play in the Open. To play in the Open Chair. Sorry. Little bit what? Back that floor. You can play in the Open Chair.
That was pretty good.
Both
That's
of
pretty
them.
good.
Both
Only
of them.
thing, Connor Moore, that's the old Tiger Woods. This new Tiger Woods, Jenna, he's got all kind of comments.
Yeah, and then what I'm feeling
a little more
mostly
gregarious.
the feelings I have. Let me just emote a little bit more. I mean,
And then when he leaves the interview, he always says the person's name. Well, thank you, Jenna. Thank you for taking time.
I love the new Tiger.
And the Bubba Watson, that was
Crying from the Masters.
the Masters
Yes.
when he won the championship.
Yes.
That's really good. That was
good stuff.
Absolutely. And the Tiger Woods voice was pretty. If you closed your eyes, is pretty spot on.
All right, so stories to start your morning now. Manny Machado headed to Hollywood. The four-time All-Star was traded from the Orioles to the Dodgers for 5 prospects.
Damn.
Machado joins a first-place team that will be looking to make a playoff push. Nick, does Machado make the Dodgers World Series favorites now?
He makes them the favorites to make the World Series out of the National League. In my eyes.
Over Houston. I mean,
no, not to win the World Series.
Okay,
That's why I'm saying.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think the 3 best teams in baseball are still all in the American League.
Yes.
In the Red Sox, Houston, and the Yankees.
Okay, all right.
But I think this
I was
jumps...
going to get fired up.
No, I know.
So hey, listen now.
This jumps them ahead of the Cubs, ahead of the Nationals, and I think it makes them clearly the best team in the NL West where they only have a half game.
That is one of the good storylines. What I like about it is the potential that he's going to be with the Dodgers for a long time. That's what I'd like to see. This 1 year higher thing, or is it going to put him in the pennant race? But, yeah, Dodgers baseball and Dodger fans should be happy for a long time to come.
All right, moving on to college football. When Nick Saban benched Jalen Hurts for Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship, a quarterback battle was born. Hurts has been rumored to possibly transfer this season, but Saban said, quote, I expect him to be there. See, how do you see the Alabama quarterback battle playing out?
Oh, Jalen Hurts, you got to go, man. Yeah. Did you watch that national championship game? You see that kid throw the ball? You see them look off that safety, look him down the middle and throw it up the sideline? Man, you got to go. Jalen Hurts is only a college quarterback. This is his pro football. Unless he decides to play in the CFL or something like that, he is not a pro prospect. So you need to play as much as possible. You can't sit there and be a backup. I typically tell my kids, because I got a lot of kids playing college and have been in a situation like this, if the guy in front of you, they moved in front of you, if he's a pro, you need to leave. If he's not a pro, you need to stay there and try to beat him out.
Especially when the guy they moved in front of you is also younger than you.
Absolutely.
So it's not like, okay, let me just wait for him to graduate. I'll get one more year.
No.
That's not how this is going to work. Listen, there's no disrespect to him, but he absolutely should transfer for all the reasons you said. The guy's better than him and younger than him. I wonder if Lane Kiffin would have a spot for him at FIU. I wonder if that would be something that would be intriguing to him there if he wants to transfer. What, see?
I'm sure Lane has his number.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure there's been some communication.
Maybe a little texting.
Nick Saban might not know, but Lane Kiffin know.
Yeah, absolutely.
LeBron James has owned the NBA since he entered the league 15 seasons ago. Now the King wants to literally own a team. LeBron's business partner, Maverick Carter, said LeBron wants to own an NBA franchise and possibly an NFL one as well. Nick, you think LeBron would be a good owner, team owner?
Real quick, did I say FIU? If I did, I meant FAU.
FAU.
With Lane Kiffin. My apologies.
No, you're good.
Listen, I wouldn't, if I was LeBron, I wouldn't try to get into the NFL ownership business. But the NBA ownership business, absolutely. Not because one business is better than the other, but stick with what you know. Stick with where you're comfortable and where you already have relationships. Like, if buying an NFL franchise would be just, to me, him getting involved in any industry that he doesn't have a lot of familiarity with. But could he be a great NBA owner? Could he have some allure like Michael Jordan, I at least thought he would have when he bought a team? Absolutely. And LeBron's talked about this for a long time, of trying to stack as much money as possible to potentially one day maybe buy the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, and we've talked to the people close to LeBron. This is not something new. This has been something that he's been thinking about building for a long, long time. And he owns a part of an international soccer team. Yeah. So that's already football in a sense right there. I disagree with you as far as he don't know the NFL. Neither does Jerry Jones. Neither does Robert Kraft. None of them know the NFL. But the NFL and the numbers, the multiples that these franchises are going for, it's a better buy for your money long term than the NBA franchises. So I believe both of them are very good options for LBJ.
All right, moving on. Carmelo Anthony's one-year experiment in Oklahoma City could be over. Reports are that the Thunder and Hawks are in trade talks centered around Melo and Dennis Schroeder. Nick, would this be a good trade for both teams?
Well, listen, the Hawks are just trying to get off Schroeder's contract, so they would be trading him and then buying out Melo. I would applaud the Oklahoma City Thunder if they did this. Here's why. They would, that luxury tax hell we're talking about them being in, if they bring salary in for Melo, then they stay in that to a degree. Like, they would be paying, if you include the luxury tax, close to $50 million for the opportunity to have Dennis Schroeder on the team. But he would make them better. He would give them another rotation piece. You'd have a good backup point guard, and then Melo would be free to sign anywhere. So I would really like this move for OKC if the owner doesn't mind cutting that check.
And then Melo, is he going to get bought out?
Melo gets bought out by Atlanta and goes wherever he wants. Exactly, yes.
I mean, I try to tell you, man, it's not a bad deal getting bought out. That's not a bad day. Like, you keep saying, oh, this is humiliating. Oh, look, oh, no, OKC's not going to buy you out. Maybe Atlanta's going to buy you out. Like, but somebody's going to give you a bag of money. So everything's good for Melo. He's making money.
All right, if you're an NBA super team and you've won 3 out of 4 titles and you've got 4 All-Stars in your starting lineup and then you add another 4-time All-Star, let's just say you can rub NBA fans the wrong way. Well, assume that super team is the Warriors. They signed Boogie Cousins and people were rubbed. But that doesn't affect Boogie in the least. In fact, he kind of welcomes the haters.
I'm not going to put myself in an already bad situation and try to prove my value or my worth as a player in a situation that's not looking to win.
Instead of 15, we're out of here.
I knew how I would be perceived from some.
Come on, one more. Awesome, yes.
I give a I'm saying that now because I'm seeing the reaction, but I didn't give a I knew what my ace was, and we made the call. There's some motherfuckers out there that's probably ripping their hair out right now. and I love it.
Okay, that was a very dramatic interview. It was the most dramatic interview I've ever seen in my entire life, and I applaud them. So Boogie Cousins says, I know what my ace was. I knew what my ace was. What was your reaction, CC, to his comments?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I know Boogie. So that's the reason why people don't want him. That's the reason why he's available. Because that type of attitude, like, you think you could build a franchise around Boogie Cousins? Like, no, you can't, because they're going to be, sometimes you're going to interview him. He's going to be non-cooperating. There's going to be times he's going to get plenty of sound bites, but, man, he's not a winner. Last time he won was at Kentucky. So saying his ace was Golden State, I don't see how this helps him that much. Like, he's not going to get beyond what people think about him by going to Golden State. So he's still going to have to repair his image when he goes next year. So I don't believe 1 year playing with the best basketball team that I've seen in a long, long time will repair Boogie Cousins' image.
All right, so I had a bunch of reactions to this, so I'll go through them quickly. One thing that he said that we didn't include there, he said this was my ace, then he said it was my nuclear option, and then he said it was his last resort. Well, it was not his last resort. Like, it wasn't quite the first, but it was much closer to first than last. You called it a panic move when we first discussed it. It was like 5 a.m. on July 2nd when free agency opens midnight on July 1. He's calling Golden State. He's initiating the conversations. So I don't think it's fair for him to call it a last resort. I think pro athletes, NBA guys in particular, have to walk something of a fine line here. Because everyone has the right to do what they want and what makes them happy and to work where they choose when they're a free agent. I get that. But the almost thumbing your nose at what I would say is the majority of fans that saw this and were like, you got to be kidding me. And saying, I don't give a bleep. I love that they were pulling their hair out. That, to me, there is a bit of a partnership between the pro athlete and the fan. And I understand
all athletes don't know that, nor do they care about that, because they think they are going to get paid regardless.
Right. And so in the current model, you will get paid regardless. But one of the reasons the salaries are as high as they are, and I do not begrudge pro athletes for a dollar they make, I got no problem with it at all, but it's because of the fan interest. Like, yes, you have to have super high skill. You've got to be, but there's amazingly accomplished high hurdlers that practice just as hard as NBA guys, but the fan interest isn't there in that to give them the salaries. And when you almost revel in the fact that it'd be one thing if you're just reveling in the fact that other guys across the league don't like it, but players tend to support other players. That to me is a statement about the fans. Like, I love that they're pulling their hair out. I don't love that. Like, you're allowed to do whatever you want. And if Boogie thought this was the best move for his career, if he disagrees with Chris, he's like, I can go win, I can get healthy, I can take my time, and then go get a max contract, so be it. Like, it is not my place to tell him he's not allowed to do that. But to have a little bit of grace for the fans of, I don't know, pick a team. Miami's had Orlando. That's like, man, we were already lapped in the field in this. If you came here, you're immediately our best guy. You go there and like that part to me, I think you got to be careful with that. I do think we got to remember the fans are a big part of this equation, and you can't make your free agency decision based on what the fans want you to do, but there's a level of empathy, or at least you could be cognizant of it in your comments after you make your free agency decision.
So much of what we're talking about is whether he could change the persona, this reputation that he's had, to now go play a year in Golden State, change that reputation, be the guy everyone wants you to be, stay healthy, and then go get your max deal. But this kind of stuff lends you to believe that maybe he isn't really the changed guy that we think he is. This quick reactionary, screw the world, like I'm going to do my own thing. Are you worried that that's going to bleed into his time in Golden State?
Well, that's always a situation, especially when he's not on the court. And if he has some type of setback, if he's challenged as far as his rehab, I mean, this is his personality. I mean, you guys think when you're under stress or duress, I mean, your personality, it comes out. So I don't expect, this huge change in personality, because for the next 5-6 months, this is all you ain't going to see him on the court. This is all you're going to hear. Like, this is all that he can do. Now he's got to try to defend his decision. Now, he thinks he wants to be the villain, but most players that I know and have encountered, they don't, man. They play the game because they love the game, but also the roar of the crowd, that roar is for you, not against you. So just be careful in trying to invite all these people like, oh, yeah, bring it on. I can take it. There's not a lot of athletes who I know that thrive being the villain.
And very few NBA guys. Very few. I'll say it for you because I know you get the, like.
Yeah, y'all not the toughest guys in the
listen,
world, okay?
Like Draymond, I think, actually thrives in that role. But we saw KD try to do it. And KD was getting ejected and kind of losing himself a little bit. LeBron tried
admitted
to do it. LeBron, absolutely right. That the first year in Miami, all right, I'll wear the black hat. And he hated it. And it, by the way, I think contributed at least in part to what was the lowest moment of his career, that series against the Mavericks, where it all felt like it was coming down on him. Like, there are some guys, I think Steven Jackson would have been fine being the villain. There are certain guys that are built for it. Most NBA guys are not. They like I think most people do, being loved. Like, he'd rather be loved than be hated in most aspects of life.
This is the thing about Steven Jackson. He wouldn't mind being the villain, but he wants to be respected.
Yeah.
All right? And when you keep making comments that don't make sense, it's hard for me to respect you. And you haven't won nothing. And after if you win with Golden State, you're not, oh, Golden State won because of Boogie. No, man, you joined a winner.
All right, let's move on now. Back to our top story. When Kawhi Leonard was traded to the Toronto Raptors for DeMar DeRozan yesterday, we thought the drama was finally over. All right, we didn't. But for sake of this segment, just follow me here. The question now becomes, will he or won't he play next season? More drama. And now this. In a recent story by ESPN's Zach Lowe, Toronto could trade Kawhi to the Lakers if it doesn't work out with the Raptors. Chris, should the Lakers still pursue Kawhi this season? Is that still on the table?
Yeah, they should try to pursue him because if you look at what's going on in Toronto, yeah, Toronto, for their fans' sake, they got one more year. All right? The ownership in Toronto decided we don't want to pay the luxury tax. So DeMar DeRozan, that's what they were. They dumped his salary. They did not want to be on the hook for. So it was inviting to them to have Kawhi for 1 year. So and they can kind of trick their fans to think, yeah, we're still competing for a championship. We can make that appearance in the final that we've never made. But after this, I mean, they're going to blow that thing up. They got other people coming off the books and everything for next year. Yes, I think Kawhi and his group still know that a trade can be made. They know there's a certain amount of time that has to pass before a trade can be made. But yes, a deal can still be done. But Kawhi, what he's got to do, it doesn't change. He's got to get on the basketball court. He's got to do is show people that he's healthy and show people he's still that low-maintenance star that 12 months ago, that's what we were basically talking about. Man, Kawhi, if he hadn't gotten hurt in the playoffs, that might have changed that series between San Antonio and Golden State. So Kawhi, what he's got to do, it does not change. But a deal with the Lakers, yes, can still be made.
And the Lakers should continually probe this. Magic should continually be just checking in with Masai Ujiri, the GM of the Raptors, and say, all right, so where are we at? How are you guys feeling? Now, I don't think a deal's going to be done. I don't think it's going to get close to being done because I think for this season is going to work out beautifully for Toronto. I think Toronto now, with Danny Green was thrown into the trade as an expiring contract. He will be the starting two guard for the Raptors. I think a lineup of Lowry, Green, Kawhi, Ibaka, who I don't have a ton of faith in, and Valanciunas, plus the fully formed bench unit that we talked about last year. I think that is a dangerous team. I do not think the Raptors would trade Kawhi at the deadline, or Zach Lowe writes around Thanksgiving or leading up to the deadline a couple months before, if they are playing as well as I believe they will. But I've been wrong before. And maybe the biggest Celtics optimists will be proven right. Maybe it can go great in Toronto, but the Celtics are going to be a 65-win juggernaut out east. And Toronto's going to say, you know what? It's going well, but he is leaving in a year. We're not better than Boston. Can we get Brandon Ingram? I don't think that will come to pass, but things happen in the NBA. Kyle Lowry's a 32-year-old, I think he's 32-year-old 6-foot point guard. Like Kyle Lowry all of a sudden could start to seriously deteriorate. And they could say, even with Kawhi playing well, we're not great. I think it would take Toronto to be disappointing for this to be on the board. But that's one of the reasons Toronto can make this trade, is because if it doesn't work out, they can still recoup a lot of the value they traded away for Kawhi.
When you say things like, if it doesn't work out, would it not work out because Kawhi's heart isn't in it because he's still a little bit injured, because he's not having chemistry with the other players, because the Raptors aren't winning? Pick a reason why
I think it would just be because the team's not good enough. Like, I personally believe Kawhi Leonard's healthy at this point. I also think he's, without question, one of the 6 best players in the league. And I think his game transitions to every system, everywhere.
And his game transition, whether or not his heart's into playing in Toronto.
Oh, I don't think he's. I think his heart's into playing basketball.
Okay.
We need to stop asking that question. Is Kawhi's heart in the basketball? You heard Greg Popovich yesterday said, Kawhi, it's all about basketball. That's all he wants to do is play basketball.
No, I agree. I didn't know if his heart was in Toronto, because he definitely has not wanted to go anywhere other than L.A.
It doesn't matter if his heart's not there. He don't have options. From a legal standpoint, what can he do?
No, he would still play. But does it affect your play when you don't want to be somewhere?
No, there's $20 million on. There's 20 million reasons why to get up and go to work. Like professional, you don't see guys turn down money. You hear a bunch of chatter. Oh, I'm getting ready to sit out. I'm getting ready to hold out. I'm getting ready. When they start issuing them checks, which you see NFL players and NBA players, you see them at work. And we can't think that Kawhi won't be motivated. He is not that type of person.
I'll bring up a Raptor who I think was a guy that did exactly what Jenna's talking about. Vince Carter on his way out. Vince Carter was so sick of being in Toronto after signing an extension there that he started not playing hard. This is documented. Started not playing hard.
Vince Carter and Kawhi, we shouldn't mention them in the same.
Right. No.
Because it's just not fair.
No, absolutely. That's where, but just let me get there. The point that I'm trying to make is we have seen, even though it's rare, we have seen guys tank it, essentially. You guys, I don't want to be here. You won't trade me. I'm going to give you 50% effort until you trade me. Vince did that in Toronto. They traded him in the Nets, and he instantly went back to being Vince Carter. That isn't in Kawhi's basketball DNA. And that's what Pop was talking about yesterday. When Pop did the interview and he said he was a great teammate, it wasn't about the max contract. All Kawhi wants to do is play basketball. It is, to me, not on the board that Kawhi Leonard is going to play a basketball game and not give it all out. That's not who he is as a player. And that's, by the way, the biggest indictment on Vince's whole career was that he tanked that half season in Toronto, because that is outside of the DNA of most elite pro athletes.
All right, let's break there. Coming up, has the Legion of Boom finally been put to bed? Next, first things first. When the Seahawks won the Super Bowl in 2014 behind the Legion of Boom, the sky was the limit. But fast forward to 2018, and Seattle is suddenly the Legion of Fairly Average. Only 6 players remain from the 22 that started in that Super Bowl. One of them, Doug Baldwin, said they miss the veteran leaders on the team, but, quote, there are still guys who can step up and fill that void. See, let's talk about this from the quarterback Russell Wilson's vantage point. Does his job change with all the other changes on the team? Does he have to sort of change his outlook in the way he plays?
Yeah, the franchise has changed. John Snyder, the general manager, does a tremendous job from a personnel standpoint, not only through street free agents, but low-round draft picks. Him and Pete Carroll, I think they run one of the best player development programs where you can see guys that may be necessarily under the radar, and they get good stuff from them. They fit their system. They fit into their locker room. So in doing it, John Snyder's job has changed. Pete Carroll's job has changed. They put more resources and money into the offense, and how they play football is going to be different. When they, in their prime, they were a dominant top 5 defensive team. Turn you over a bunch, hard to convert third down, very, very physical, get after the passer. Now, with these guys being transitioned, with Earl Thomas being only one there, Cam Chancellor in retirement, Richard Sherman down in the Bay playing, they got to play a different style. You cannot play as much man-to-man or even cover 3 from a press bail that they made famous there in the NFL. You can't play that unless you have the personnel. And with the resources on offense, their wide receiving core is significantly better. Their quarterback is a franchise quarterback who you can drop back and throw the ball 40 times a game, regardless of his height. Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks that we have in the NFL. And as he's developed, they've gotten away from their running game. Their offensive line, one of the worst in the NFL. So Russell has had to run for his life. When they had beast mode, and they had the offensive line that was a lot better. They could be a lot more physical. Right now as an offense, they're more of a finesse offense, and that's why Russell Wilson's numbers are what they are.
I mean, this will surprise some people. Russell Wilson last year led the NFL in touchdown passes. Number 1, 34 touchdown passes. Also, if last year's...
You got to thank our intern for that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. Last
a lot
year,
smarter than Nick Wright.
Thank you. Last year, if you don't remember exactly the ebb and the flow of the season, through 13 weeks, through 12 games, the Seattle Seahawks were 8-4, coming off a victory over Philly, a Philly team, by the way, that still had Carson Wentz, and they were primed to make the playoffs once again, as they had in every year of Russell Wilson's career. They were, with 2 minutes left in Week 17, they were in position to make the playoffs. Now, they miss a field goal. Atlanta beats Carolina. They end up missing out on the playoffs. But, they were a missed field goal at the gun in Week 17 away from being a 10-win team again. How do they do that? With the injuries they suffered last year, with the turnover, with the turmoil. It's because they have a superstar quarterback. That's not the only reason. Everything you're saying about roster construction is true. I think Pete Carroll's an excellent head coach. I'm not saying he gets all of the credit, but he is, right now, this moment, one of the best players in this entire league. And the point Chris made, that you can drop him back and throw the ball 40 times, something that even quarterbacks with high passer ratings, guys with good numbers, guys like Dak Prescott his rookie year, you didn't believe you could, and last year I think you were proven correct on that. You absolutely can do that with Russell Wilson. So, why do I have faith in Seattle that they'll be able to deal with the turnover? Because their 2 most important spots on the team, they have A or A-plus guys in Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll. And if you got an in-your-prime quarterback and still a really quality coach and a GM that's going to fill the roster well, you should be in the discussion as a playoff contender every year, as they have been every year he's been there.
What is Seattle's priority right now? So you have your quarterback and you have your head coach. What should their priority be? Does it have to be shoring up that line, the offensive line?
It has to be shoring up the offensive line and having some type of running attack. If you look at the Rams, what the Rams present from a defensive standpoint, because they're going to make the playoffs. It'd be nice to win their division. I don't think they're going to win their division, so that NFC is stacked. So getting a wild card spot is going to be difficult. If that offensive line played a lot better, if they had better talent on the offensive line, then which would help the running game. So that helps Russell Wilson not only protect him, because there is none of the great quarterbacks we have in this league, none of them run for their life the way Russell Wilson does. None of them have to ad-lib. There is none of them that have to, one of Jenna's favorite terms, off schedule. Man, their offense is off schedule almost every play, and Russell makes it happen. So those areas right there would improve Seattle a great deal.
They tried to help Russell out with the running attack through the draft this year by taking Rashad Penny. We'll see what type of pro he is. But C's point about the offensive line, and listen, in the NFL, you gotta recognize who's in your division, because that's your not only best path to the playoffs, but it's your only path to a home playoff game, is winning your division. We know the Rams have Aaron Donald. They added in Ndamukong Suh. But let's not forget 2 games against San Francisco. When people talk about San Francisco, it's all Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy Garoppolo. San Francisco has spent high draft picks on D linemen repeatedly. I think that's probably their biggest strength of their team as a whole, is the young blue chip guys they have on defensive line there. So that's a quarter of your schedule where you have guys up the middle that can get after your quarterback. And the only times in Russell Wilson's career he's been less than an A or A-plus quarterback is when he's been playing hurt. Why has he been hurt? Because they can't protect him. He's running around. He gets a twisted ankle. He hurts his leg, and he plays through it. Because the guy's, I don't know that he's ever missed a game in his career, but he's been dinged up throughout. And so that is something that's the X factor for Seattle. Can they keep Russell Wilson upright?
And he can't do it forever. He can't do it every game of the season. He can't spend every single game running for his life.
Which is what he had to do last year. Last year,
he's pretty good.
He's pretty good. He's unbelievable.
All right, let's take a break. Coming up, is Kawhi Leonard on the verge of sitting out this season? That is next on First Things First. Back here, First Things First, we're joined by Yahoo Sports senior NBA writer Chris Mannix.
It's been
Hey,
too
Chris.
long.
We're already
Good to see you,
arguing
brother.
about
How are you?
Boston.
What we
here.
should have
Like,
done
during the break,
is
we're just
roll
arguing
during
about
the break
Celtics.
We're
instead
gonna
of
get
this.
we'll
Okay.
discuss that later in the show.
I'm just
we got
saying.
other stuff to do right now. I was just getting you revved up.
The water in Philadelphia helps the younger players grow more than the water in Boston.
Let's save it for later.
That would be the conversation that you didn't hear, but now you are hearing. Chris, a week ago, if I asked you what city Kawhi wanted to play next season, you'd say?
Los Angeles.
That would be the one. That's because his camp let it be known Kawhi would only play in Los Angeles. Kawhi is going to Toronto. Adrian Wojnarowski is now reporting Kawhi is warming up to the idea of playing for the Raptors, while conflicting reports have him potentially sitting out for the season. So, Mannix, is it possible Kawhi would actually sit out this coming season?
Let me say this first. Kawhi needs to speak. Kawhi needs to have a press conference. Kawhi needs to do a sit-down interview. He needs to stop letting his representatives whisper in the ear of reporters and put this stuff out there. I think some of his representatives, which include a family member, are doing him kind of a disservice right now by creating this narrative. I mean, you look at some of the reports from the last couple of days, it's been largely the same language used. You know, no desire to play in Toronto, no intention of playing in Toronto. That may be true, but Kawhi needs to start talking, number one. I don't believe he'd sit out the season just because NBA players don't do that. You don't see NBA players holding out. You go back to Kyrie Irving a couple of years ago. Kyrie Irving, when he was trying to think of a way not to play for the Cavaliers, it didn't really register with him to hold out. What registered with him was, let's have surgery. Let's go under the knife and let's see and that'll put me on the shelf for a couple months. I'll make you paid by doing that. So I think no matter what Kawhi thinks of Toronto, no matter how he feels about being a Raptor, he's going to show up at training camp and he's going to play a full season.
Yeah, I know for a fact no one is telling Kawhi to sit out the season. People have said that, all these rumors, reports, but I talked to Kawhi, it's people, and that's not even part of the conversation, him sitting out. So I don't know why people are talking about it, because typically people aren't informed. So even that information is not coming from Kawhi's camp. Now, if Kawhi's objective was to get out of San Antonio, his camp did a good job for him because he's not part of San Antonio, that organization. If Kawhi's objective is to get to Los Angeles, they're still doing a good job because that is still on the board for him to get there. But I said exactly what the same thing that you said. At some point, as an athlete, you have to release a statement. You don't have to necessarily do a sit-down interview or anything, but release a statement, have a press release, and state a few things. One being, I'm going to play basketball this season, and I'm not going to answer questions about free agency, a lot like LeBron has done a number of times. You can ask how many different ways you want to, stack it however you want to. I'm not going to answer questions about my pending free agency until after the season, and having a press release would be able to do that.
Listen, I do think that Kawhi's people, prior to the trade, let anyone that they trusted, anyone that would listen, know all options are on the table. Like, anything and everything's on the table unless we get moved to Los Angeles. Unless we get moved to Los Angeles, you trade for Kawhi, okay, do it at your own risk. Maybe he won't show up. Maybe who knows how the physical's going to go. I think they made it clear all options are available. And then I think the world changed for them once the trade actually happened. Because the world did change for them once the trade actually happened. Now, it's one thing to bluff. It's one thing to act like you're going to really go all in on this. It's another thing to do what I would consider something that is not only borderline unprecedented for a player of his caliber in this league, but it would also undo what the image he had built, whatever that image was, I think was overwhelmingly positive in San Antonio for the entirety of his career until this saga started. I still think most of that image is intact. I think there are people that don't love the way he handled it, but Greg Popovich had an opportunity yesterday to crush Kawhi, and he went the other way. He said he was a great teammate. He said that folks like myself, he didn't name me, but I was one of them, who made a big deal about Kawhi not being on the bench. He said, listen, talking heads need to talk, but it was never an issue for us. All Kawhi wants to do is play basketball, and that's not only a ringing endorsement from his former coach, but from probably the league's most respected coach. So Kawhi can, if he does what you guys are recommending, it gets him back on track to being thought of as the guy that he was thought of 12 months ago.
A couple things. One, I think Pop took the high road I do think it was an issue for him, Kawhi not being around the team. It was an issue for people in the organization, Kawhi not being around the team. It was a source of frustration. I mean, look, publicly, the players even said it, and I believe that the coaching staff and front office privately believed it behind the scenes. I agree with you, Chris. Like, if it's a press release, whatever it is, he needs to say something, but he needs to do it in a non-condescending type of way. Like, don't come out and say, I don't know where this stuff came from. We know where it's coming from. The idea that he might sit out the season, the people that are writing that are not making it up out of nowhere. What they're doing is taking stuff from the handful of people that are in Kawhi Leonard's orbit who are dropping those types of breadcrumbs, to these reporters out there. So he's got to be out there and say, look, things went wrong. Don't have to be that specific. We don't want to be. Things went south in San Antonio. I had my preferences, but now that I'm a Raptor, I'm going to give it my all there. And I'm excited about the possibility of playing for a team that could win the Eastern Conference.
Let's talk about that. If he does, should he join and sit and play with the Toronto Raptors this year? How could it be? Where could Toronto's ceiling be?
Ceiling is a championship. Frankly, I mean, that's a ceiling. I think that's a tough ceiling to achieve.
An Eastern Conference championship?
No, I think the whole thing. I think you can if you're Toronto. Again, you said the ceiling, so like that's way up there. That's the least likely scenario. But this is not a team that I would say goes into a finals matchup and gets blown out. You can't when you have a guy like Kawhi. If you get to the finals, it means Kawhi Leonard's 100%. It means he's all the way back from that injury. And Kawhi Leonard is a former Finals MVP. Kyle Lowry is still playing at all-star level. All those young guys on the team, we spend a lot of time on and off the air talking about young players and their development. They're not sexy names in Toronto, but OG Anunoby is a good player. Mm-hmm. Pascal Siakam is a good player.
And they kept all their great
They kept all those guys. That was a big part of this deal. They give up Jakob Poeltl, but they can live without Jakob Poeltl with Valanciunas still around. So if they get to the finals, I don't think they're a favorite, but I think they've got a puncher's chance of winning a championship.
Yeah, their biggest problem from a basketball strategy standpoint is their backcourt. How are they going to defend? Kyle Lowry at the point guard, Danny Green at the 2. Those guys are not good perimeter defenders, and they will struggle defensively. Offensively and their bench, very, very good. If they run the same type of offense, and you add Kawhi compared to that mid-range game that's almost obsolete in the NBA of DeMar DeRozan, I could see they're a very talented basketball team. They got a new coach. We don't know how he's going to respond, how they're going to respond to him. So for me, the biggest question is their backcourt. How are they going to defend?
So I actually disagree with you there. I think Danny Green, now he kind of lost his ways last year in San Antonio. Danny Green was a very good 3-and-D guy.
Yeah,
But Danny Green is a defensive situational player. He's not a very, very good athlete. You have to play great help defense for him because he doesn't have the athleticism to be able to play on the perimeter.
That's fine. But I think I actually think defense could be one of the strengths of Toronto. I think Kyle Lowry can dial in if his age does not become a big hurdle this year. It will at some point, but last year it wasn't. I think they got, obviously adding Kawhi Leonard, you get much better defensively. I think I think their ceiling is just a step short of yours. I think their ceiling is they could win the East. Are they the favorites to win the East? No. But you could make the argument they have the best player in the conference. Like, I think it's Giannis. Some people think it's Kyrie. But he's certainly – DeRozan was not in the discussion. DeRozan was a tier beneath. DeRozan, it was like that Oladipo, like that tier. Now they have a guy who's in the discussion as best player in the conference. Maybe he's certainly the most accomplished player in the conference. And so now you can say, okay, we have a lineup of Lowry, Green, Kawhi, Ibaka, and Valanciunas. I don't love the front court, but I love those 3 perimeter guys. And we know how good the bench unit was. Like, that's a team that could present problems for teams throughout the league. Like, right now, are the Raptors one of the 6 best teams in the league? I would think so.
The front court actually is a weird asset for them in the Eastern Conference because if you look back at the games they played against Boston, who would be their top competitor, they've been physical, and they've out-muscled Boston. That still remains a weakness of the Celtics. But the biggest question mark with Kawhi in Toronto, is you mentioned the coach, Nick Nurse, a bit of an unknown, has not been an NBA head coach before, traveled the world, a lot of experience, highly respected guy, which is why he got this job. But Kawhi thrived in that Popovich system. They put him in the right places. They developed him organically within that structure. How does he operate in a Nick Nurse kind of free-flowing, 3-point shooting offensive system? That's a bit of a question.
On the coaching thing, just quickly here, If you remember at the end of the year, I said I'd keep the coach and trade DeRozan. They didn't know they were going to be able to trade DeRozan. Certainly didn't know they'd be able to trade him for Kawhi Leonard. I do wonder if Masai Ujiri and Toronto had to do it all over again. If they knew this trade was coming, if they would have kept Dwayne Casey.
No, they'd still fire him. They'd still fire him.
If they knew LeBron was leaving.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I think, and this is I won't get too deep into the weeds on this one, but I think Masai Ujiri has been waiting for a long time to hire his own coach.
Yeah, I think he wants to be the figurehead of that organization.
Yeah, but he's also their best asset in keeping Kawhi Leonard long term. A very engaging guy who I think is going to develop a strong relationship with Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet a lot of money on that one, though.
In the other direction?
Yes.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.